Part 1. My name is Kyle Porter, and I'm the host of the YouTube channel Phantom Archives with over 5 million subscribers. Many of you are probably following my Abandoned Nightmares series, where I single-handedly explore abandoned and supposedly haunted locations across America. But there are things I've never shared on my channel. Moments that equipment couldn't capture, feelings that words couldn't describe, and truths so terrifying I wouldn't dare broadcast them online. Today, I've decided to tell it all. Last October, I went to New Orleans to film the first episode of the new season. The location, the LaLaurie Mansion, the former residence of Delphine LaLaurie, a notorious socialite infamous for her unimaginable cruelty towards enslaved people in the early 19th century. Stories of this mansion have been recounted for generations, making it one of the most famous haunted places in America. We're going to get the first image of the mistress herself. Joss, I said to my cameraman, my voice full of excitement as we stepped into the main hall. Joss looked at me skeptically. Many YouTubers have tried, Kyle. They all failed. But no one has our equipment, I chuckled, patting my bag filled with tens of thousands of dollars worth of gear. 4K cameras with the best night vision on the market, infrasound microphones that can pick up an insect's breath, and the latest EMF detector from MIT. It was late afternoon when we finished setting up. The last rays of sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting strange, elongated shadows on the old wooden floors. Joss had to return to the hotel for an urgent call, leaving me alone in the mansion. This was exactly what I wanted. The most genuine moments always came when I faced the darkness alone. "Good evening, Delphine," I said into the void, my voice slightly trembling. "I know you're still here. I'm not here to disturb you, but only to record what's happening." Silence. The only sound was the creaking of the old wooden floors beneath my feet. I began exploring each room, a temperature gauge in hand. The digital thermometer showed a normal 78 deg F, but as I stepped into the master bedroom, the number suddenly dropped to 62 deg F. "Interesting," I murmured, my eyes fixed on the screen. No reason for such a sudden temperature drop. Then I heard a cry, the soft sob of a woman, seemingly echoing from the hallway. I spun around, my heart pounding. Is anyone there? Silence. I checked the audio recorder. It had captured the cry. It wasn't my imagination. I moved deeper into the hallway, EMF scanner in hand. As I approached the main staircase, the device suddenly shrieked wildly. The reading jumped from 0.2 mg to 8.7. "Damn it," I whispered. "Someone is standing right in front of me." I raised my camera, sweeping it across the empty space before me. The EMF reading suddenly returned to 0. Still, the air remained unusually cold. As night fell, I set up infrared cameras around the house and retreated to the living room, watching the screens displaying every corner of the mansion. 3 hours passed without anything noteworthy. My eyelids began to droop. I startled awake. A sound came from upstairs, as if someone was opening a door. I grabbed my handheld camera and quietly moved towards the staircase. The creaking of the wood beneath my feet sounded like screams in the still night. When I reached the second-floor hallway, a chilling sensation ran down my spine. The moisture from my breath condensed into white clouds. The temperature had dropped below 50 deg F. This couldn't be normal. My flashlight beam swept across the closed bedroom doors. All were quiet, but as I turned back towards the stairs, I saw it. A wet fingerprint on the old mirror mounted on the wall. My heart skipped a beat. I had checked this mirror earlier. There were no fingerprints. I slowly approached, shining my flashlight on the damp mark. It was still dripping, as if it had just been placed there. I shuddered, feeling as if someone was standing right behind me, looking over my shoulder into the mirror. "Damn it," I muttered, trying to control my ragged breath. "If you're here, Delphine, give me another sign." I turned off my flashlight. In complete darkness, it appeared. A faint white shadow darted across the end of the hallway, so fast I couldn't make out its shape. I quickly turned my flashlight back on, my heart pounding as if to burst. Nothing. But on the floor directly beneath the mirror was a wet trail, as if someone had just walked through there with soaking wet feet. I never shared this footage on YouTube. No one would believe it was real. But I knew what I saw that night, and I could never forget the feeling when I went back to check the surveillance cameras the next morning, only to find that all of them had been turned off at exactly 3:33 a.m. And on each device, the same message was written in condensed moisture. Do not spread what you see, it will follow you home. I didn't listen. And that's why I began this journey, to recount what truly happens in abandoned places across America. And the next place I went was Myrtle's Plantation, a place where spirits not only exist but can also touch you. Part 2. Watch the latest episode of Phantom Archives. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. I concluded my familiar intro, my eyes fixed on the lens, a bright smile on my face. I waved, signaling Riley, my audio technician. Cut. Amazing, Kyle, Riley exclaimed. The LaLaurie Mansion episode hit over 10 million views in just 3 days. Viewers are going crazy over that wet fingerprint on the mirror. Thanks, I nodded, relieved to have Riley replace Joss. After the incident at LaLaurie's, Joss had refused to continue working with me, declaring he wasn't paid enough to deal with ghosts. Fortunately, Riley, our longtime audio technician, was willing to take on the additional role of cameraman. They haven't seen anything yet, I shrugged, my eyes sweeping across the vast grounds of Myrtle's Plantation before us. The ancient building, with its Greek Revival architecture, stood majestically amidst rows of moss-draped southern oaks. Myrtle's Plantation wasn't just an ordinary plantation built in 1796. It was known as one of the most haunted houses in America, with at least 12 recorded ghosts, including Chloe, the enslaved woman with a green turban wrapped around her head, famous for poisoning her owner's family. Let's start setting up the equipment, I said as the sun began to dip below the trees. I want motion sensors in the main hall, an infrared camera in the children's room. And Kyle, do you think we should set one up in the kitchen too? Riley interrupted, his voice anxious. I just read that Chloe had her ear cut off in the kitchen before she poisoned the family. Good idea, I nodded, then looked towards the row of bedrooms on the second floor. Set up a gas detector in the kitchen too. Many people think strange smells are due to gas leaks, but I want to prove otherwise. By 10:00 p.m., we had finished setting up. Riley started to feel uneasy. Kyle, he whispered, glancing at the stairs. I just heard children laughing from upstairs. Could be tourists, I replied, even though I knew we had rented the entire property for the night. There were no tourists here. You know that, I said, looking at my watch. All right, it's time for the real test. Riley, you can head back. I want to be here alone. Riley didn't need to be told twice. Be careful, I'll be back at 7:00 a.m. tomorrow. As the sound of Riley's car engine faded, I began to set up my command center in the living room. Screens displayed feeds from 5 different cameras, the audio recorder was active, and minimal lighting was used so as not to interfere with the equipment. Hello, I said into the empty space. I'm Kyle Porter. I know you're here and I don't mean to intrude. I just want to record what's happening. Silence. 2 hours passed without anything noteworthy. I decided to move upstairs to the children's bedroom, supposedly where 3 of the family's children, who were poisoned, had died. As I entered the children's room, the EMF meter in my hand began to beep, the reading rising from 0.3 to 2.7, not too high, but enough to catch my attention. Is anyone here? I asked, my voice soft. If so, please let me know by increasing the reading on this device. The EMF reading suddenly surged to 5.8, then dropped. Thank you, my heart pounded. Was that one of the children? No response. I took a small ball from my fanny pack and placed it on the floor. If someone is here, please push this ball. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly, the ball began to roll, not towards me, but towards the window. I quickly captured the scene with my handheld camera. That's amazing, I said, trying to keep my voice calm even as my heart hammered. Can you tell me your name? Just then, the infrared camera placed in the corner of the room captured the faint image of a child standing behind me. On the monitor, I could see it, a shadowy figure about 3 feet tall watching me from the doorway. I didn't dare turn around. Instead, I continued to speak, my eyes glued to the screen. How long have you been here? The figure on the screen moved gently as if coming closer to me. Suddenly, I felt a cold draft brush pass the back of my neck. The temperature gauge in my pocket showed a sudden drop from 74 deg F to 58 deg F. Can you do something to let me know you're here? I asked, my voice slightly trembling. Clack, a small sound came from behind me. As I slowly turned, I saw an old marble rolling across the wooden floor, a marble that certainly wasn't there before. I picked it up, feeling its coldness penetrate my glove. "Is this yours?" The lights in the room flickered once. "I'll keep it as a gift," I said, putting the marble in my pocket. "Thank you." I decided to set up audio traps automated recording devices that would activate when a sound occurred in several locations throughout the house before resting in the living room. I drifted off on the sofa, the surveillance monitor still lit before me. When I awoke at 5:00 a.m., I quickly checked the devices. Most showed nothing noteworthy until I replayed the audio trap placed in the second-floor hallway. Faint footsteps, children's giggles, and a tiny voice. "He doesn't know we're watching." I trembled, listening to the recording over and over. There was no way to fake this sound. When Riley returned in the morning, I didn't tell him about the recording. A part of me wanted to keep it to myself. "Do you believe in child ghosts?" I asked as we packed up the equipment. Riley looked at me strangely. "What happened last night?" "Nothing," I replied, my hand unconsciously touching the marble in my pocket. "Just strange sounds." As we left, I felt something was off. The marble in my pocket was now strangely warm, and throughout the journey to our next destination, Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, I couldn't stop thinking about that tiny voice. "He doesn't know we're watching." I never told anyone that every night since leaving Myrtle's plantation, I'd heard faint footsteps outside my hotel room door. Part 3. I've always liked abandoned prisons. There's something about the cold stone walls and dark corridors, holding the despair of thousands of souls, that I find intimately familiar. But Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia was a different kind of beast, opening the gates of hell. I whispered as I walked through the imposing archway of the nearly 200-year-old prison. My footsteps echoed on the stone floor, reverberating from the damp, mold-splashed walls. Eastern State wasn't just a prison. It was a symbol of solitude and suffering, the first to implement a system of individual solitary confinement, where inmates were completely isolated 24/7, not allowed to speak or even see another person. "So you've decided to go alone?" Sean, the tour guide, looked at me skeptically. "I work best alone, without a film crew," I replied, patting my heavy backpack filled with equipment. Besides, what I captured in the previous 2 locations was enough to scare the whole team off. Sean smiled wearily. "Trust me, I've worked here for 10 years. Today's ghost stories are nothing compared to what truly happened within these walls." "Tell me a story no one knows," I challenged, turning on the voice recorder in my shirt pocket. Sean looked around as if to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "Cell block 14, he lowered his voice. "In 1916, an inmate named James Morton cut his own throat with a sharpened spoon. Before he died, he wrote on the wall in his own blood, 'I am never alone here.' Strangely, when we checked the records, there was no inmate named James Morton ever confined here." I nodded, feeling intrigued. "Can I go into that cell?" "Block D has been sealed off for safety reasons," Sean shrugged. "But hey," he took out a bunch of keys. "I leave at 7:00. After that, you're free to explore anywhere you want until morning. Just don't do anything to get me fired." "Thanks, Sean. This video will mention your help," I laughed. "I don't want my name in it," he retorted quickly. "And Kyle, a word of advice, don't use a Ouija board here. Anything you invite in, you might not be able to get rid of." I nodded seriously, even though a Ouija board was already in my backpack. When Sean left, I began to set up my central command station in the old office area. Screens displayed feeds from 4 cameras placed at strategic locations. But what I was truly eager to test was my brand new indoor drone, a compact device equipped with LiDAR that could fly through narrow spaces and create 3D maps. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding," I murmured as I released the drone into the tunnel system beneath the prison. The screen displayed real-time images as the drone flew through the dark tunnels. The LiDAR map gradually appeared on my laptop screen, revealing a network far more complex than what was recorded in the official documents. In particular, an unmarked tunnel led from Block C to a circular space beneath the central courtyard. "Interesting," I mumbled, marking the location for later exploration. It was dark when I began the actual investigation. Equipped with a headlamp, a highly sensitive audio recorder, and an EMF scanner, I headed towards Block C, the forbidden area. The rusty lock opened easily with Sean's key. Dust flew up as the heavy iron door creaked open eerily. A long corridor with tiny cells stretched before me, engulfed in thick darkness. Cell 14, I reminded myself, slowly walking along the row of cells. Cells 1 through 13 were unremarkable, just small, cramped spaces with a single bed, a sink, and a toilet. But when I reached cell 14, I felt something different. The air seemed thicker, colder. "James Morton," I called softly as I stepped into the cell. "I heard you're never alone here." I shone my flashlight on the walls, searching for the inscription Sean had mentioned. Nothing but peeling paint and damp, moldy concrete. The EMF scanner in my hand remained silent. "Perhaps it's just a story," I whispered, slightly disappointed. Then I heard it a soft whisper, as if someone was talking from the next cell. I stopped, holding my breath. "Hello," I called. Silence. I took the super-sensitive microphone from my pocket and attached it to the wall between the two cells, connecting it to my headphones. The amplified sound startled me. The whispers weren't just from one person, but many, talking back and forth in indistinguishable words. "Can I understand what you're saying?" I asked, my heart pounding. The whispers stopped. Then, as clear as if someone was standing right next to me, "Why did you come to Block D?" I froze. "Block D? Sean hadn't mentioned any Block D. I don't know Block D," I replied, my voice trembling. "Under your feet." The EMF scanner in my hand suddenly shrieked wildly. The reading shot from 0.3 to 15.7, the highest I had ever seen. Then it died completely, the battery utterly drained even though I had just put in fresh ones. I looked down at the cell floor. One of the flagstones seemed looser than the others. I knelt down, using my multi-tool knife to pry it open. Beneath was a pitch-black space. I shone my flashlight down, seeing a narrow staircase leading deep below. The LiDAR map from the drone hadn't shown this. "Block D," I whispered, realizing. This wasn't a regular prison block. This was a network of secret cells beneath the main prison. I should go back. I knew I should go back, but this was exactly the kind of discovery my audience craved. I turned on the GoPro camera mounted on my head and began to descend the stairs. The air down here smelled heavy with dampness and something else, a sweet, putrid odor I couldn't identify. The staircase led to a narrow corridor with many small iron doors on either side. Not cells, but more like closets. "What the hell is this?" I mumbled, approaching an iron door. It was securely locked, but there was a small, eye-level window. I peered into the darkness, shining my flashlight through the window. Inside wasn't a cell, but a small, closet-sized space, just enough for one person to stand upright. And on the walls, scrawled everywhere, was the same phrase repeated hundreds of times: "I am never alone here." My heart stopped. I backed away, bumping into the opposite door. The clang of metal echoed in the silent corridor. Then I heard it, the creaking of an iron door opening from the far end of the dark hallway. "Is anyone there?" I called, my voice cracking. No reply, but the creaking continued. I shone my flashlight towards the sound, but saw nothing but the empty corridor. I decided to go to the end of the hallway where the sound came from. My flashlight began to dim, even though I had just replaced the batteries. When I reached the end of the hallway, I saw a larger door ajar. "James," I called, not knowing why that name came to mind. I pushed the door open. Inside was a small, circular room with a table in the center. On the table was an old, open ledger. My flashlight suddenly went out. In complete darkness, I heard whispers from all directions as if dozens of people were standing around me. I stumbled backward, trying to find my way out. "Someone help me," I yelled. Suddenly, a faint light flashed from the ledger on the table, enough for me to see the words written there. "Welcome to Block D, Kyle Porter." I don't remember how I ran up the stairs. I don't remember how I locked the flagstone back in place. I only remember running nonstop until I was out of Eastern State Penitentiary, gasping for breath in the Philadelphia night air. I never broadcast what I found beneath Block C. Instead, I faked an episode about creaking iron doors and unusual EMF phenomena. But sometimes, on silent nights, I still hear the whispers from those secret cells. And the strangest thing, when I rechecked the GoPro footage the next morning, there was nothing. Just me standing in an empty cell 14 for 2 hours, staring at a blank wall. But I knew what I had seen that night, and I knew my name had appeared in that ledger. Even though I had never been to Eastern State before. So I diverted to Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, a place where the insane were perhaps the sanest. Part 4. And here we are, Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, the second largest hand-cut sandstone building in the world, second only to the Capitol building. I said into the camera with a feigned, enthusiastic voice. In truth, after the incident at Eastern State, I had considered canceling this trip. But sponsors had paid, and my YouTube channel needed new content. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia, is a colossal Gothic revival building constructed in the 1800s. Originally designed for 250 patients, by the 1950s, it housed up to 2,400 people in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. Stories of abuse, unethical medical experiments, and high mortality rates made it one of the most famous haunted locations in America. Today, I'm alone, I continued, adjusting the camera. George refused to come here after what happened in Philadelphia. But don't worry, I've brought plenty of equipment to explore this place. Are you a YouTuber? A voice suddenly sounded behind me. I startled and turned to see a middle-aged man in a security guard uniform. His name tag read Frank. Yes, I'm Kyle Porter from Phantom Archives. Never heard of it, Frank shrugged. But I've seen many like you come here, all thinking they'll be the one to find definitive proof of ghosts. He sneered. Then they all leave with blurry photos and unidentified noises. I have much better equipment than others, I replied, trying to sound confident. And I've encountered some pretty convincing phenomena at previous locations. Frank looked at me with a strange gaze. Have you ever felt like you're being watched, Kyle? Not by ghosts, but by something else. I swallowed hard, thinking about the ledger with my name in Eastern State. Why do you ask? Just curious. Frank handed me a set of keys. These are the master keys. You can go anywhere except the electroshock therapy ward on the 4th floor. The floorboards are rotted. I'll be back at 7:00 a.m. tomorrow. You're not staying overnight? I asked, slightly worried. No one stays here overnight, Frank replied simply. Good luck, Kyle. As Frank left, I began to set up my central command station in the spacious main hall. The dim afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, casting long rays across the cracked marble floor. Dust motes floated in the air like living creatures. I decided to start by exploring the nurses' station area, rumored to be haunted by the ghost of Nurse Wilson, a notoriously cruel head nurse. I took out a UV light from my backpack, hoping to find old traces invisible to the naked eye. The nurses' station was at the end of the east corridor. It was still relatively intact, wooden medicine shelves, an old desk, and a rusty examination bed. I turned on the UV light and turned off the regular lights. Under the faint purple glow, hidden stains appeared on the walls, old bloodstains, handprints, and what looked like hurried writing. I approached to get a clearer look. Save us, I read aloud the faint words. Wilson is killing us. I shuddered, recording this discovery with my handheld camera. But as I swung the camera to capture another angle of the room, I saw a strange light reflecting in the lens. As if someone was standing behind me, though when I turned around, no one was there. If someone is here, please let me know, I said into the empty space. Silence. I took out a vibration detector, a sensitive tool that could detect the slightest movements, imperceptible to the naked eye. The device showed a flat line, nothing unusual. Then I heard it, a soft clinking sound from one of the medicine shelves. I spun around, shining my flashlight towards the sound. An old glass medicine bottle was gently vibrating as if someone had just touched it. The vibration detector in my hand still showed a flat line. That can't be, I mumbled, approaching the bottle. The label was faded but still legible. Thorazine for agitated patients. I decided to move to the patient ward. The long corridor, with countless closed doors on either side, seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. I began opening each room one by one. Most were empty except for a rusty iron bed or an overturned chair. In room number 217, I discovered something different. A bed was still intact with torn sheets. On the walls were scratches, as if someone had tried to count the days. and in the corner of the room, a tattered old rag doll. Strange, I mumbled, picking up the doll. A small piece of paper fell out from inside. I opened it and read, "Beware the man in the blue uniform." My heart quickened. I didn't believe in omens, but this was too coincidental to ignore. I put the doll back and left the room. As night deepened, I decided to test a thermal camera, an expensive device that could show even the slightest temperature changes. I set up a simple experiment in the main hall. I placed a rubber ball in the center of the floor and filmed it with the thermal camera. "If someone is here, please move the ball," I said into the empty space. I sat and watched the monitor. Initially, nothing happened. Then, after about 20 minutes, the temperature in the room suddenly dropped from 68 deg F to 52 deg F in just a few seconds. On the thermal camera screen, I saw a faint figure moving through the hall, the tall, imposing figure of a man in what looked like a uniform. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling. The figure stopped as if listening. Then it slowly turned towards me. On the screen, I could see it was the figure of a tall man, his head tilted slightly to one side. Though it was only a thermal image, I could feel its gaze fixed on me. The ball remained motionless. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. The figure began to move, not towards the ball, but towards me. I froze in place, unsure whether to run or continue filming. Then I felt a chilling gust of wind brushed past my face, even though no windows were open. The thermal figure was now just a few feet away from me, but I couldn't see anything with my naked eyes. "Dr. Friedman," I guessed, recalling a name from my research. "Dr. Wilson." The figure stopped. On the screen, I saw it raise its hand as if pointing towards the stairs. Then all my electronic devices simultaneously shut down. Camera, lights, thermal scanner, everything. I was plunged into complete darkness. "Damn it," I whispered, stumbling to my feet, trying to turn on my backup flashlight. It didn't work. In the darkness, I heard footsteps not from afar, but right next to me. The sound of hard leather shoes on the stone floor. "Anyone?" I called, my voice breaking. A whisper right next to my ear. "Room 502, she's still waiting." I screamed, backing away and hitting the wall. Just then, all the equipment simultaneously came back to life. Light flooded the room, no one was there. But the ball had moved. Not just moved, but neatly placed next to an old piece of paper that hadn't been there before. I picked up the paper, my hands trembling. It was a page from a patient registry. A name was circled in red ink. "Elizabeth Friedman, room 502. "Room 502, I repeated. "That's on the 5th floor, the ward for the most dangerous patients." Every instinct told me to run, to leave this building and never return. But curiosity outweighed fear. I packed up my equipment and headed towards the stairs. The 5th floor was much darker and colder than the others. The air here seemed thick, difficult to breathe. I slowly moved along the corridor, counting the room numbers: 498, 499, 501. I stopped before room 502. The heavy iron door was closed. Unlike the other rooms, the observation window on this door was covered with a metal plate. I pulled out the master key, my hands trembling so much it was difficult to insert it into the lock. The lock clicked dryly. I pushed the door open. Room 502 was unlike any other room in the building. The walls were padded with white, now yellowed and torn. There was no bed, only a metal chair in the center of the room with intact leather straps, and on the walls, reddish-brown stains formed a message: "I am not insane." I felt a cold draft at the back of my neck. When I turned around, the door had slammed shut. I don't remember much of what happened next. I remember trying to open the door, but it was stuck. I remember the whispers starting, not just one, but dozens, hundreds of voices from all around. And I remember seeing a figure in the corner of the room, a woman in a white hospital gown with deep cuts on her wrists. When I woke up, it was morning. I was lying in the main hall, my equipment still intact beside me. Frank was standing over me, his face worried. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I found you unconscious here." "Room 502, I mumbled. "I need to go back there." Frank looked at me strangely. "There is no room 502, Kyle. This building only has 4 floors." I never broadcast what happened at Trans-Allegheny. Instead, I faked an episode about strange noises and sudden temperature changes. But the dreams still come to me every night. dreams of room 502 and the woman with cuts on her wrists. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I could swear I see a figure in a blue uniform standing in the corner of the room, its head tilted to one side. Now I'm on my way to the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, the place that inspired Stephen King to write The Shining. And I wonder what I'm truly chasing, proof of ghosts or the truth about myself. Part 5. On screen is the legendary Stanley Hotel, the place that inspired Stephen King to write his horror novel, The Shining. I said into the camera, trying to hide the shivers running down my spine. After the incident at Trans-Allegheny, a part of me considered canceling the series and returning to Lowe's Angels. But my YouTube channel had surpassed 8 million subscribers, and a new sponsor, a major electronics brand, had paid for this episode. The Stanley Hotel, built in 1909, sits at an elevation of 7,500 feet in the Rocky Mountains at Estes Park, Colorado. I continued, my voice clear as if reading a travel guide. Stephen King stayed in room 217, where he had strange experiences that inspired him to write his classic work. "I see you've done your homework," a voice behind me said. I turned to see an older woman in a neat business suit. Her name tag read Miss Aliner, event manager. "I always do thorough research before each trip," I replied, turning off the camera. "Thank you for allowing me to film overnight." "The Stanley Hotel always supports those who are interested in our history," she smiled, "though most people like you are looking for ghosts rather than Edwardian architecture." "I'm interested in both," I replied, trying to appear professional. "Have you ever witnessed anything unexplainable?" Aliner looked at me with an unreadable gaze. "I've worked here for 23 years, Mr. Porter. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that these walls hold more than just dust, but I'm not the one to tell you those ghost stories." She handed me a bunch of keys. "These are the keys to room 217 and access cards to the public areas. You're free to explore, but please avoid disturbing other guests." "Can I go into the Crystal Ballroom?" I asked, recalling stories of ghostly masquerade balls seen there. "Of course, but I must warn you. The piano sometimes has a mind of its own," she said with a mysterious smile before walking away. I began setting up equipment in room 217, the most famous haunted room. This was where a housekeeper was severely injured in a steam explosion in 1911, and where Stephen King spent the fateful night that inspired The Shining. The room looked surprisingly normal: a king-size bed, antique furniture, and windows overlooking the mountains. "Nothing too scary," I mumbled, placing an EMF scanner and a highly sensitive audio recorder around the room. The sun began to set as I finished installing the equipment, casting brilliant orange rays through the windows. I decided to explore the hotel while waiting for night to fall, the ideal time for supernatural phenomena. The ballroom was a large space with high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and a grand piano in the corner. No one was there when I entered. I approached the piano, placing an audio recorder and a decibel meter on it. "I've heard this piano sometimes plays by itself," I said into the empty space. "If someone is here who wants to play a song, I'd love to hear it." Silence. I placed an infrasound microphone, a device that can capture sounds below the human hearing threshold. Infrasound is sometimes considered a sign of supernatural activity. As night deepened, I returned to room 217 to monitor the equipment. Nothing unusual happened for the first few hours. I gradually felt sleepy. My eyelids drooped. Then a single note sounded in the distance, the clear sound of a piano key being pressed. I startled awake, looking at my watch. 1:07 a.m. "The ballroom," I mumbled, quickly grabbing my infrared camera and running down the hallway. The hotel was plunged into darkness and silence. Only my footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. As I neared the ballroom, I heard it. Disjointed notes, as if someone was lightly touching the keys. I slowly opened the door, camera raised. The ballroom was empty, but the piano was making sounds, the keys moving gently without anyone touching them. "Unbelievable," I whispered, moving closer, my camera recording everything. As I got within 10 feet of the piano, the music stopped. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing in the vast space. "I don't mean to disturb. Please continue." Silence. Then slowly a melody began. No longer disjointed notes, but a complete waltz, ethereal and haunting. I recognized it as Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Amazing, I whispered, shivering with both excitement and fear. You play beautifully. Who are you? The music continued. There was no reply. I checked the EMF meter. The reading was normal. But the infrasound microphone was recording an unusually high level of infrasound, about 17 to 18 Hz, just below the human hearing threshold. Suddenly, the music stopped. The room was plunged into suffocating silence. Please don't stop, I said. I really enjoyed that music. No response. I decided to approach the piano closer, shining my flashlight around. There were no wires or remote control devices. There was no way to explain the self-moving keys. As I was examining, a sudden cold draft blew past me, even though all windows and doors were closed. I swept my infrared camera around the room and saw something unbelievable. On the screen, a faint white shadow was moving along the far wall as if dancing to silent music. My God, I whispered, my heart pounding. Is anyone there? The white shadow continued to move, not one, but many, swirling and gliding like a ghostly dance. They had no clear form, just faint streaks of light, but their movements were too purposeful to be just reflected light. I stood motionless, not daring to breathe. Then slowly, the piano began to play again. This time, a more cheerful melody, an old-fashioned waltz I didn't recognize. The white shadows moved rhythmically to the tune, as if hosting an invisible ball. Is this a party? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Are you having a dance? The music stopped abruptly. The white shadows vanished, and in the silence I heard a soft whisper. You're not invited. I froze, feeling as if the blood in my veins had turned to ice. Then suddenly, all the lights in the ballroom flickered on, so blindingly bright I had to close my eyes. When I opened them, I found I was no longer alone. A man in an old-fashioned tuxedo stood by the piano, his hands resting on the keys. He looked at me with sad eyes. I'm sorry, I stammered. I didn't mean to disturb. The man didn't reply. Instead, he pointed towards the door, then slowly faded before my eyes until he completely disappeared. The lights in the room also went out, leaving me in complete darkness. I quickly ran back to room 217, my heart racing. As I closed the room door, I heard the piano music resume in the distance. This time, it was a sad melody, like a farewell. I checked the equipment in the room. All were still functioning normally, with no signs of unusual activity. I decided to review the footage I had just recorded in the ballroom. When I played the video, my heart stopped. On screen, the piano was indeed playing by itself. The keys moved clearly without anyone touching them. But the white shadows I had seen through the infrared camera didn't appear, and the man in the tuxedo? I fast-forwarded and rewound the footage many times, but saw no sign of him, only me standing alone in the room talking to thin air. That can't be, I mumbled, a wave of fear washing over me. I saw him. He was standing right there. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I drifted off, I was woken by the distant piano music and the feeling that someone was standing by my bed, looking down at me. The next morning, as I checked out, I met a leaner at the reception desk. Did you have a good night? She asked with a knowing smile. I'm not sure, I replied honestly. I think I witnessed something in the ballroom but didn't capture it on film. Leaner nodded, not surprised. Do you know about Stanley, the man who built this hotel? I shook my head. He was a talented piano musician and loved to host dances in the ballroom. They say he continues that tradition even after his passing. She handed me a guest register. Can you sign here? I took the pen and opened the book. My heart stopped when I saw the previous page. The last name entered in the register, Kyle Porter, but it wasn't my signature. I didn't sign this book, I said, my voice trembling. Leaner smiled mysteriously. Perhaps another guest with the same name. I looked at the date next to the signature. October 15, 1912. I never broadcast what truly happened at the Stanley Hotel. Instead, I faked an episode about strange auditory phenomena and a self-playing piano, enough to attract viewers, but not so bizarre that no one would believe it. But sometimes, on silent nights, I still hear the melody of Moonlight Sonata echoing from afar, and I wonder if I ever truly left the Stanley Hotel, or if a part of me remains there, dancing forever in the ballroom with guests from the other side. My next destination was the Winchester Mystery House in California. A labyrinthine house with staircases leading to nowhere and doors opening to walls. I wondered if that place could be more bizarre than what I had witnessed at the Stanley. Or, as I was slowly beginning to suspect, if I was the strangest thing in this story. Part 6. You're watching Phantom Archives, and I'm Kyle Porter. Today, we're going to explore one of America's most bizarre architectural marvels. I concluded my familiar introduction, feeling my smile tighten on my face. After the experiences at the Stanley Hotel, a part of me wanted to stop, return to Lowe's Angels, and make videos about food reviews or something similar. But my YouTube channel had reached 10 million subscribers, and contracts with sponsors forced me to complete this series. The Winchester Mystery House, I continued, the camera close on my face, was built by Sarah Winchester, widow of the founder of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. She believed she was haunted by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, and this house was continuously built for 38 years according to the instructions of those spirits. Sounds like you've memorized your lines, a voice behind me said. I turned to see a middle-aged man in a tour guide uniform with a name tag that read Marcus. I always do thorough research before each trip, I replied, turning off the camera. Thank you for allowing me to film overnight. Marcus shrugged. We usually decline, but the director is a fan of your channel. There's just one condition. You are not to use a Ouija board or any form of spiritual invocation. We've had enough trouble with amateurs doing that. I don't believe in those things, I lied. A Ouija board was still in my backpack, but I decided not to use it this time. Good, here's a map. Marcus handed me a crumpled piece of paper. I've marked the safe areas to walk. The house has 160 rooms, 40 staircases, and many doors that open into walls or nowhere. Don't try to open any sealed doors. I'll be careful, I promised, taking the bunch of keys from Marcus. When Marcus left, I began setting up equipment in Sarah Winchester's bedroom, where she died in 1922. The room was perfectly preserved with its four-poster bed, antique vanity, and an old oil lamp still on the bedside table. Good evening, Mrs. Winchester, I said into the empty space. I don't mean to disturb you. I just want to understand why you built this house. Silence. I took a compass from my pocket, not for EMF, but a real compass. I had read that compasses often malfunction in the Winchester Mystery House, as if the magnetic field inside was disturbed. The compass spun wildly in my palm, the needle constantly rotating. I slowly moved around the room, observing its reaction. As I approached the wardrobe, the compass needle suddenly stopped, pointing directly at the wooden door. Interesting, I mumbled, opening the wardrobe door. Inside was empty, just a few old hangers. But behind them I noticed a small crack in the wall, possibly a secret door. I gently pressed the wall, nothing happened. I tried pulling one of the hangers, and surprisingly a section of the wall slid open, revealing a small, narrow corridor inside. Bingo, I whispered, turning on my flashlight. The corridor was only about 2 feet wide, just enough for one person to pass through. Thick dust covered the floor, but I noticed faint footprints, not human, but like a child's footprints. My heart pounded. I decided to follow the footprints. The narrow corridor led to a small spiral staircase going down. I carefully descended, my camera recording everything. The staircase led to a small room in the basement, a place not on any map. The room was empty except for a small wooden table in the center. On the table was an old book, its leather cover cracked with age. I picked up the book, carefully opening it. It was Sarah Winchester's diary, with pages written in hurried, difficult-to-read handwriting. They come at night, I read a passage. The spirits demand justice. They say I must continue to build, or I will join them. But now I know the truth. The house isn't to keep them out, it's a prison. I turned to the next page, but the rest of the book was blank. Strangely, the last page had fresher ink, as if it had just been carefully written. Beware of door 13. I shuddered, placing the book back on the table. Just then I heard a creaking sound from above, as if someone was walking in the secret corridor. Is anyone there? I called, my voice echoing in the small space. No reply, but the creaking continued. Now it was moving down the stairs. I shone my flashlight towards the sound but saw nothing. Then suddenly my flashlight went out. In complete darkness, I felt a cold draft brush past. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. My hand brushed against an old switch, and the lights in the room flickered on. No one was in the room with me, but on the floor, fresh mud footprints appeared. Small footprints, like a child's, leading from the stairs to the table, then vanishing. "This can't be happening," I mumbled, my heart racing. I quickly ran back up the stairs, through the secret corridor, and returned to Sarah Winchester's bedroom. As I stepped out of the wardrobe, I noticed the room had changed. The oil lamp on the bedside table was lit, though I was certain it was off when I left. I looked at my watch. 11:13 p.m. I decided to explore the rest of the house, trying to find the door 13 mentioned in the diary. The Winchester Mystery House was a true labyrinth. I walked through endless seeming corridors, staircases leading to ceilings, and doors opening into empty space. Every time I thought I understood the house's structure, I discovered a new passage, a new room. I counted the doors as I walked through a narrow hallway. 10, 11, 12. I stopped before the next door. There was no number on it, but counting from the beginning of the hallway, this had to be the 13th door. Unlike the others, this door seemed newer, with a shiny brass lock. I tried the keys from Marcus's set, but none fit. "Beware of door 13, I recalled the diary's warning. I should have ignored it and moved on, but curiosity won. I took out my lock-picking kit from my bag, a skill I learned from a locksmith friend for emergencies. After a few minutes of fumbling, the lock clicked softly. I pushed the door open. Inside wasn't a room, but a short corridor leading to another door. I slowly walked through the corridor, feeling watched from all sides. The second door was unlocked. I pushed it open and found myself standing on a small balcony overlooking nothingness. This balcony was on the outer wall of the house, about 3 stories above the ground, but there were no stairs or pathways leading down. It simply led nowhere. "That's insane," I mumbled, stepping onto the balcony. The full moon illuminated the garden below, casting strange shadows on the grass. When I turned to go back inside, I found the door had closed. I quickly grabbed the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. The door was locked, leaving me trapped on the balcony. "Damn it," I cursed under my breath, trying to calm down. "Is anyone there? I'm stuck here." No reply. I took out my phone to call Marcus, but there was no signal. I looked down, considering climbing down, but the wall was too slick to grip. Then I heard a soft giggle from behind me. I spun around, but the balcony was empty. "Anyone?" I called, my voice trembling. The giggle came again, clearer this time, and then slowly I saw small footprints appear on the balcony floor. Wet mud prints, identical to the ones I saw in the secret room. They appeared out of thin air, one by one, as if an invisible child was walking towards me. My heart stopped. I backed away, my back pressed against the balcony railing. The footprints continued to appear, coming within inches of me, then stopped. "Hello?" I whispered. No reply, but I felt a cold hand touch mine. I screamed, snatching my hand back, and just then the door behind me creaked open. I didn't hesitate. I dashed inside, ran through the corridor, and returned to the main hallway. My heart pounded, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I stopped to regain my composure. "What the hell just happened?" I mumbled, looking down at my hand. On my wrist was a muddy, child-sized handprint. I quickly returned to Sarah Winchester's bedroom, where I had placed my equipment. All was still functioning, recording everything. I checked the infrared camera, hoping it had captured something while I was gone. On the screen, the room was empty for most of the time, but just before I returned, something appeared. A small shadow moved through the room, approaching the camera. It stood there for a moment, as if looking into the lens. Then it vanished just as I stepped into the room. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, listening to the strange noises echoing throughout the house. Faint footsteps, distant giggling, and sometimes whispers too faint to understand. The next morning, when Marcus returned, I didn't tell him about what I had seen. Instead, I just thanked him and quickly left. "Did you find anything interesting?" Marcus asked as I prepared to leave. "Nothing special," I lied. "Just strange noises and some unusual cold spots." Marcus nodded, but his eyes told me he didn't believe me. "Is door 13 still locked?" My heart stopped. "Door 13 in the east hallway," Marcus said, his face serious. "The door leading to the balcony with no exit. We always keep it locked for safety reasons." "Of course," I stammered. "I didn't see any door like that." Marcus looked at me strangely, then glanced down at my wrist, where the muddy child's handprint was still visible. "Looks like someone paid you a visit," he said softly. "That's Elizabeth, Sarah Winchester's granddaughter. She drowned in the goldfish pond behind the house in 1881. They say she still plays hide-and-seek with brave guests. I said nothing, just nodded and quickly left. On the way to our next destination, Rolling Hills Asylum in New York, I couldn't stop thinking about the wet mud footprints and the feeling of an invisible child's cold hand gripping mine. And the most terrifying thing, even though I had thoroughly washed, the muddy child's handprint was still on my wrist, unable to be scrubbed away. Part 7. Like and subscribe to see the scariest haunted videos on YouTube. I concluded my familiar intro, waving to Megan, my new photographer, to cut the camera. After the experiences at the Winchester Mystery House, I had decided I would no longer go alone. At least having someone else by my side would give me another witness. Cut, great, Kyle, Megan said, lowering the camera. But you seem tense. Is everything okay? I reluctantly held out my wrist, where the muddy child's handprint from Winchester was still visible. Do you see this? Megan squinted. See what? A smudge? My heart stopped. To me, the mud stain was as clear as the first day, but Megan couldn't see it. Nothing, I mumbled, pulling my sleeve down. Just a stain. We stood before Rolling Hills Asylum in East Bethany, New York, a colossal building that had once been a poorhouse, a hospital, and finally an asylum before closing in the 1970s. With over 1,700 recorded deaths and countless stories of abuse, it was considered one of the most intensely haunted locations in the eastern United States. This place gives me a strange vibe, Megan admitted, looking up at the massive facade of the building. And I don't even believe in ghosts. You will soon, I mumbled, recalling what had happened at previous locations. Welcome to Rolling Hills, a voice sounded behind us. I turned to see a middle-aged woman with fiery red hair and a face full of freckles. Her name tag read Sharon, site manager. I'm Kyle Porter, and this is Megan, I introduced. Thank you for allowing us to film overnight. Phantom Archives, right? Sharon nodded. I watched your video about Myrtle's plantation. Very impressive, though I think you missed a lot of interesting details. I looked at her intently. What do you mean? Sharon smiled mysteriously. Just a feeling. Anyway, here are the keys and a map. Most of the building is marked, but stay away from the morgue area in the basement. The floor isn't safe. Morgue, Megan raised an eyebrow. I thought this was an asylum. Before it was an asylum, it was a hospital, Sharon explained. And before that, a poorhouse. They had to do something with the dead, didn't they? She turned her attention to me. I heard you've been to Eastern State and Waverly Hills. Yes, I replied, slightly surprised. How did you know? Word travels fast in the paranormal community, Sharon shrugged. People say you saw something you didn't include in your videos. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Just rumors, I said. Of course, Sharon nodded, not looking convinced. I'll be back at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. Don't try to enter the morgue. And a piece of advice, don't open the cadaver drawers. As Sharon left, Megan turned to me. She's creepy. And did you lie about Eastern State and Waverly Hills? I've never been to Waverly Hills, I replied, my eyes still fixed on Rolling Hills. That's our next destination after this place. But she spoke as if you'd already been there. She must have confused me with someone else, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Let's start setting up the equipment. We spent the rest of the afternoon setting up cameras, microphones, and detectors throughout the building. I was particularly interested in the solitary confinement area, where the most dangerous patients were held. The tiny, dark rooms with heavy iron doors were still intact, a stark reminder of the cruel treatment methods of the past. Do you believe in ghosts? Megan asked as we placed an infrared camera in one of the confinement rooms. I don't know what I believe anymore, I answered honestly, but I've seen things that can't be explained. Like what? I considered telling her everything. About the wet fingerprint at LaLaurie's, about James Morton and the secret Block D at Eastern State, about the man in the tuxedo at the Stanley Hotel. But I was afraid she would think I was insane. Just strange lights, unidentified noises, I lied. Things that could be explained by science but are still bizarre. Megan nodded, not entirely convinced. Where to now? I looked at the map. I want to check the nurse's station first. Many people report seeing the ghost of Nurse Roy there. As we walked through the long, dark corridor, I couldn't help but notice the heavy, suffocating feeling that enveloped the place. The air seemed thick, difficult to breathe. Megan felt it too. I could see the tension in her every step. The nurse's station was at the end of the hallway, a large room with many medicine cabinets and a rusty examination table in the center. I took out my UV flashlight, turned off the regular lights, and began to scan around. "Oh," Megan exclaimed, looking at the wall through the purple light. "Do you see it?" Under the UV light, traces appeared on the wall, dark red streaks like dried blood. They formed a series of strange characters, unlike any language I had ever seen. "We should photograph this," I said, handing the camera to Megan. As she filmed, I took out my EMF detector and began to scan around the room. The reading was normal until I approached the morgue, the area Sharon had warned us not to enter. The device beeped rapidly, the reading jumping from 0.2 to an unusually high 8.3. "Megan," I called, waving her closer. "Do you see it? The unusually high EMF reading near the morgue." "Could be old electrical wiring," Megan suggested, always practical. "Or something else," I said, moving closer to the door marked "Morgue, do not enter." Despite Sharon's warning, I couldn't suppress my curiosity. I tried the doorknob. It was locked, as expected. "Kyle, don't," Megan warned. "We shouldn't go in there. Sharon said the floor isn't safe." "I just want to look through the window," I replied, pointing to the small glass panel on the door. I stood on tiptoe, peering through the dusty glass. The morgue was a large space with yellowed brick walls and cracked white tile floors. Along the walls was a row of metal cadaver drawers, where the bodies of the unfortunate souls who died in the asylum were once kept. "See anything?" Megan asked. "Just a normal morgue," I replied, still staring at the cadaver drawers which looked intact. Just then I heard a soft knock from inside one of the cadaver drawers. Knock, knock, knock. My heart stopped. "Megan," I whispered, "did you hear that?" "Hear what?" She came closer, pressing her ear to the door. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking sounded again, clearer this time. Megan's eyes widened. "Someone's knocking from inside a cadaver drawer. That can't be happening," I said, though I knew full well that in the world of my recent experiences, anything was possible. "We should go," Megan said, backing away from the door. "But what if someone's trapped inside?" I asked, though I knew it was an irrational idea. "Could be an intruder or something not human," Megan said, her voice trembling. "We should come back later with Sharon." I knew she was right, but curiosity won. I took out my lock-picking kit from my bag. "Kyle, don't," Megan warned. "Just a quick look," I said, starting to work on the lock. "If the floor isn't safe, we'll just stand at the threshold." The lock clicked open softly. I slowly pushed the door open. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness inside. The morgue was eerily cold. I could see my breath condensing into white mist. The cadaver drawers lined the walls, looking old but intact. Each one was numbered from 1 to 12. "Where did the knocking come from?" Megan asked, standing close beside me at the threshold. As if to answer her question, the knocking sounded again. 3 slow knocks came from cadaver drawer number 7. Knock, knock, knock. "No way," Megan whispered. "There has to be a logical explanation." "Only one way to find out," I said, carefully stepping into the room, testing the floor with each step. "Kyle, don't," Megan pleaded, but still followed me, camera in hand. I approached cadaver drawer number 7, my heart pounding in my chest. The brass handle was tarnished with age. I placed my audio recorder on the drawer and turned it on. "If someone is inside, knock once," I said, my voice trembling. Knock, a single knock, so clear that both Megan and I startled back. "You're not going to open it, are you?" Megan asked, her face pale. "I have to know," I replied, my hand on the cadaver drawer handle. "Sharon said not to open the cadaver drawers," Megan reminded me. "There's probably a reason for that." But I couldn't stop. I slowly pulled the handle. The metal shrieked as the drawer slid out. The cadaver drawer was empty. No body, no bones, nothing but unusually cold air. "Nothing," Megan sighed in relief. "Wait," I said, bending down to look closer. At the bottom of the cadaver drawer was a deep scratch, as if someone had used a sharp object to carve into the metal. I shone my flashlight on it. It was a name and a date. Emma Sloan, 1924. Emma Sloan, I read aloud. Do you know this person? Megan shook her head. No, but we can look for her in the records. Sharon must have them. She stopped mid-sentence as my flashlight suddenly went out. Immediately after, hers did too. We were plunged into complete darkness. Megan, I called, my voice echoing in the cold space. I'm here, she replied, her voice trembling. Where's your backup flashlight? I fumbled in my pocket, but before I found the light, I heard it. The clang of metal, as if all the cadaver drawers were opening simultaneously. We have to get out of here, I said, reaching out for Megan in the dark. Kyle, she whispered, someone's touching me. I'm not touching you, I replied, finally finding my backup flashlight and turning it on. The light revealed an unbelievable sight. All the cadaver drawers were open, and from each, a faint mist was rising, gradually forming human shapes. Run, I screamed, quickly pulling Megan towards the door. We ran through the corridor, our hearts racing, not daring to look back. We only stopped when we reached the main hall, where we had set up our central command station. What the hell was that? Megan gasped, her face pale. I don't know, I answered honestly. But we recorded it, right? Megan checked her camera. The battery was dead. I don't know if anything was recorded. I sighed in disappointment, but then realized we still had the fixed cameras we had placed throughout the building. It's okay, we still have the surveillance cameras. We checked the monitors displaying feeds from the cameras. Most were normal until we watched the feed from the corridor near the morgue. On the screen, a faint figure was moving along the corridor. Not smoke or light, but the clear shape of a woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform. She stopped before a wall, seemingly writing something. That's where we saw the strange characters under the UV light, Megan whispered. On the screen, the nurse turned towards the camera as if she knew we were watching. Her face wasn't clearly visible, just a blurred streak, but she seemed to be saying something. What is she saying? Megan asked, trying to read her lips. I turned the volume up to maximum, but only heard static. Then, through the static, a faint voice sounded. Find Emma, she's still in the drawer. Megan and I looked at each other, a chill running down our spines. We have to find Emma Sloan's records, I said, perhaps in the administrative office. We found the office on the first floor, a small room with old filing cabinets lining the walls. We began to search, flipping through hundreds of yellowed files. After nearly an hour of searching, Megan cried out, Found it! Emma Sloan, admitted 1922, died 1924. I looked at the record. Emma Sloan, 19 years old, admitted to Rolling Hills for mental disorder and hallucinations. In the notes section, a line was circled. Patient constantly talks about characters on the walls and messages from the other side. How did she die? I asked. Megan turned to the last page. Suicide according to the official report. But she stopped, her eyes wide as she continued to read. There's an added note, patient found in the morgue. Although no one brought her down there, the body had deep cuts on the wrists but no blood in the room. No blood, I repeated, as if she didn't die there. But if not there, then where? Megan asked. A terrifying hypothesis formed in my mind. The cadaver drawer. She was locked in a cadaver drawer while still alive. Megan shuddered, but who did that and why? I flipped through other pages of the file, searching for clues. In the treatment notes section, a name appeared multiple times. Dr. Walter Jenkins, primary treating physician. We need to find Dr. Jenkins's records, I said, returning to the filing cabinets. After some searching, we couldn't find his records, but in an old incident logbook, we found a notable entry. Dr. Walter Jenkins died 1925, suicide by cutting wrists in the morgue. Beside the body was a page of paper with strange characters. Strange characters, I repeated, recalling what we had seen on the wall under the UV light. Like what Emma said and what we saw on the wall. Do you think Jenkins did something to Emma? Megan asked. Then a year later committed suicide out of guilt. Or because she came back, I said, feeling a chill. Megan and I decided to return to the morgue, this time with more backup flashlights and full recording equipment. We knew we were going against Sharon's warning, but we needed to find out the truth. As we approached the morgue, the air seemed thick, difficult to breathe. The knocking had stopped and the cadaver drawers were closed. I approached cadaver drawer number 7, where we found Emma's name. I slowly opened it, It was still empty except for her carved name. But when I shone the UV light inside, another message appeared. Characters identical to what we saw on the wall. "Do you understand it?" Megan asked, looking over my shoulder. "No," I replied, "but I think it's some kind of code or ancient language." Suddenly, the characters began to change before our eyes, seemingly rearranging themselves into English words. "He's still here, be careful." My heart pounded. "Jenkins," I whispered. "She's warning us about Jenkins." Just then, a loud noise sounded behind us, as if a door was slamming shut. We spun around, only to find the morgue door closed. "No," Megan ran to the door, pulling the handle. "It's locked." "There has to be another way out," I said, trying to stay calm. "A window or—" Our flashlights began to flicker, the light weakening. In the dim darkness, I saw a dark shadow forming in the corner of the room, gradually taking the shape of a tall, thin man in an old-fashioned doctor's suit. "Megan," I whispered, "don't look in the corner." But of course she looked, and when she saw the dark shadow approaching us, a terrified scream escaped her throat. "Jenkins," I said, backing away, pulling Megan with me. "Dr. Jenkins, we don't mean to intrude." The dark shadow stopped as if considering my words. Then slowly it raised its hand, not towards us, but towards cadaver drawer number 7. "I think he wants us to look at the drawer again," I said, slowly moving towards it. When I opened the cadaver drawer again, it was no longer empty. Inside was an old, rusty key, a key that seemed to appear out of thin air. "A door key?" Megan asked hopefully. I picked up the key and turned back to look at the dark shadow. It was still there, but now a smaller white shadow stood beside it, the faint figure of a young woman in a hospital gown. "Emma," I whispered. The white shadow nodded, then pointed to the door. I quickly ran to it, inserting the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. As the door opened, a cold gust of air rushed in. Megan and I didn't hesitate. We dashed out and ran nonstop until we reached the main hall, safe and bright. "That can't be happening," Megan gasped, her face pale. "What did we just see?" "I think we just witnessed 2 trapped souls," I said. "Jenkins and Emma, and I think Jenkins didn't commit suicide. He was killed by Emma in revenge. And the strange characters, a language of the dead. I guess Emma learned it during her time here, and that's why they thought she was insane." We never told Sharon about what happened that night, but as we left the next morning, she handed me a small piece of paper. "This might help you on your next trip," she said. "Waverly Hills." On the paper was a series of characters, identical to the ones we had seen on the wall and in the cadaver drawer, and beneath, a line of text, "Not all the dead have gone." In our video about Rolling Hills Asylum, I only mentioned the unusually high EMF phenomena and the strange noises from the morgue. But both Megan and I knew the truth. We had met trapped spirits, and somehow I felt that our next trip to Waverly Hills would bring even more terrifying things. And the most terrifying thing, the slip of paper Sharon gave me had disappeared from my pocket. But those characters, I still saw them every time I closed my eyes. Part 8. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky. Once one of the largest tuberculosis hospitals in America. I said into the camera, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. Built in 1910, it witnessed over 8,000 deaths during its operation. With the body chute, a 500-foot tunnel used to transport bodies down the hill without alarming patients, Waverly Hills is considered one of the most haunted locations in America. "Cut," Megan yelled, lowering the camera. "You look tense, Kyle. Is everything okay?" I looked up at the massive 5-story building before us. Since the incident at Rolling Hills 2 weeks ago, I had been haunted by the strange characters Sharon had given me. Characters I now saw in my dreams. "I'm not sure we should be here," I admitted. "There's something about this place. It's not right." "You did your research, didn't you?" Megan asked, starting to unload equipment from the car. "Remember when we first talked, you said it was all scientifically explainable phenomena. Now you're saying it's not right." I didn't answer immediately. How could I explain that since starting this series, I had seen things beyond all scientific explanation? How could I tell her about the wet fingerprint at LaLaurie's, about the secret Block D at Eastern State, about the man in the tuxedo at the Stanley Hotel, or about door number 13 at the Winchester Mystery House? "Just a hunch," I finally replied. "But we're here. Let's get it done." We were greeted by Keith, a large man with a thick beard and wise eyes. He was the current manager of Waverly Hills, which now opened for tour and ghost hunting groups. Phantom Archives, Keith nodded as we introduced ourselves. I watched your video about Eastern State, very impressive. I managed a strained smile. Thank you. But you missed a lot of things in that video, Keith said, looking at me intently. More interesting things. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Keith smiled mysteriously. Just a feeling. Anyway, here are the keys and a map. You're free to explore, but stay away from the isolation ward on the 5th floor. The floor isn't safe. Megan and I looked at each other. This was the 3rd time we had heard the same warning, almost word for word. One more thing, Keith said as he prepared to leave. If you hear a dry cough, don't follow it. That's how she lures people. Who is she? Megan asked. Mary, a nurse who hanged herself in room 502, he replied. At least, that's the story they tell. But the wounds on her neck don't look like they're from hanging. They look like something else. With that warning, Keith left, leaving us with the massive house and the deepening twilight. So, room 502, Megan said, looking up at the dark windows of the 5th floor. We're going there, aren't we? Of course, I replied, although every instinct told me to run, but first, let's set up our command station. We chose a room on the 1st floor as our central control station, setting up monitors to display feeds from cameras placed throughout the building. Megan, always practical, had brought 3 backup tablets and spare batteries for all equipment. This time, we won't lose any evidence, she said, her face determined. Once set up, we began to explore. Waverly Hills was a colossal structure with 5 floors of wide corridors, patient rooms, and treatment areas. Many areas had severely deteriorated, with collapsed ceilings and rotting floors. The 1st floor was once the patient reception area and administrative offices. The 2nd and 3rd floors were for male and female patients. The 4th floor was for the most severe cases. And the 5th floor was the isolation ward, where patients with almost no hope of survival were sent. I want to check the air pressure gauge, I said as we ascended the stairs. I've read that paranormal activity can affect air pressure. Since when do you believe in paranormal things? Megan asked, half-jokingly. I don't know what I believe anymore, I replied honestly. We reached the 4th floor, where ghostly figures were supposedly most active dark shapes moving along the corridors and disappearing into walls. The pressure gauge in my hand displayed normal pressure levels as we walked through the abandoned patient rooms. But as we neared the isolation room, a small room used to confine violent patients, the device suddenly let out a warning beep. Large pressure differential, I said, looking at the screen. A 15% drop in just a few seconds. Could be a broken window, Megan suggested, always looking for logical explanations. There are no windows in the isolation room, I replied, approaching the heavy iron door. The isolation room was a small, narrow space with torn padded walls. No windows, no furniture, just a thin mattress on the floor. As I stepped inside, a suffocating feeling enveloped me, not just from the cramped space, but from a sense of despair that seemed to permeate the very walls. My God, Megan whispered, standing at the threshold. I can't imagine being locked in here. I took out my slow-motion camera, a camera that could record 1,000 frames per second, capable of catching movements too fast for the naked eye. I want to try an experiment, I said, placing the camera on a small tripod. Many people report seeing shadowy figures pass through this room. We'll record it and see if we catch anything. We left the room, letting the camera run. While waiting, we continued to explore the 4th floor. Kyle, Megan suddenly stopped, grabbing my arm. Do you hear that? I listened. At first, I heard nothing but the wind whistling through broken windows and the creaking of the old building. Then I heard a faint, dry cough echoing from the end of the corridor. The cough, I whispered, recalling Keith's warning, don't follow it. But what if someone needs help? Megan asked, looking worried. Keith said that's how she lures people, I reminded her. There's no one here but us. The cough sounded again, clearer this time and seemingly closer. It sounded truly painful, as if someone was coughing up blood. We should check the camera, I said, trying to resist the temptation to follow the sound. See if we caught anything in the isolation room. We returned to the isolation room and retrieved the camera. When I reviewed the footage, my heart stopped. In the slow-motion video, a figure appeared, not faint or translucent, but clear and solid as real. It was the shape of a gaunt man in a patient gown moving from one wall to another as if walking through the room. But the most terrifying thing was the distorted face with sunken eyes and a wide-open mouth as if screaming silently. "No way," Megan whispered, her eyes fixed on the screen. "This is unexplainable." "And he's not the only one," I said, pointing to the corner of the room. "Look." In the corner, over a dozen other figures stood silently watching. They only appeared for a single frame, too fast for the naked eye to see, but caught on camera. "We have to check room 502, I said, feeling a strange urge, "where Nurse Mary died." Megan nodded, though she didn't look as confident as before. "We'll need our best equipment for that place." We took a laser grid from my backpack, a simple device that projects a straight beam of light through the air. Any object passing through the laser will disrupt it, even objects invisible to the naked eye. As we ascended the staircase leading to the 5th floor, the air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. My pressure gauge beeped continuously, the pressure reading steadily decreasing. "It feels like diving deep underwater," Megan remarked, her breath coming in short gasps. The 5th floor was darker than the others. Many windows were boarded up, and the electrical system was completely defunct. We had to rely on flashlights and the light from our equipment. "Room 502 is at the end of the corridor," I said, my eyes on the map. "We have to be careful." "Kyle, the floor isn't safe," Megan warned. We slowly moved along the corridor, testing each step. The air was unusually cold, even though it was a warm summer night outside. Our breath condensed into white mist before us. "Do you hear that?" Megan suddenly stopped. I listened. The dry cough sounded again, this time from ahead, from the direction of room 502. "Don't follow the cough," I reminded myself and Megan. "But we're going to room 502 anyway," Megan pointed out. "If the cough comes from there, we'll continue, but we have to be careful," I decided. "Let's set up the laser grid here," I said, pointing to the corridor. "If anything passes through, we'll know." I installed the laser device, creating a strong red beam of light piercing the corridor. We also placed an infrared camera to record any disruptions. As we approached room 502, the cough stopped. Instead, a suffocating silence enveloped us. Room 502 was a large room with tall windows, now boarded up. It had once been the head nurse's office, with a view of the entire surrounding area. The old wooden door was partially damaged with deep scratches, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. "Here it is," I said, my hand on the doorknob. "Ready?" Megan nodded, camera in hand. I slowly pushed the door open. A creak echoed in the silent corridor. Room 502 was empty, except for a rusty iron bed in the corner and a single chair near the window. The walls were covered in graffiti. Some were from modern vandals, but some seemed older with faint words. "Help me," and "She is watching." "It feels really strange," Megan whispered, walking around the room. "Like someone is watching us." I took out my temperature gauge and scanned around the room. The temperature was quite even, around 62 deg F, colder than normal but not unusual for an old building with no heating system. Then suddenly, the temperature gauge showed a significant cold spot near the window. The temperature dropped to 40 deg F in just a small area. "Megan," I called, pointing to the gauge, "there's a cold spot near the window." She approached with the infrared camera. "I don't see anything." "Try the thermal camera," I suggested. Megan switched to the thermal camera, and we both saw a bluish-glowing human figure against the orange-red background of the room. It was the figure of a woman in a nurse's uniform, standing motionless by the window. "Mary," I whispered. As if hearing her name, the figure turned towards us. On the screen, we could see her face, beautiful but distorted by pain, with a long, deep wound on her neck. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling. "We don't mean to disturb." No response, but the figure on the screen began to move, not towards us, but towards the door. "She's leaving," Megan said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "No," I shook my head, recalling the laser grid we had set up. "She's going towards the laser." We quickly ran into the hallway, but the cold figure had vanished from the thermal camera screen. The laser beam still shone through the corridor, undisturbed. "Maybe she disappeared," Megan suggested. Then we heard it. The dry cough sounded from the far end of the corridor, beyond room 502, towards the area Keith had warned us not to go. "Don't follow the cough," I repeated, but I had already started moving towards it as if hypnotized. "Kyle, stop," Megan called, but I couldn't stop. The cough led us to a large double door at the end of the corridor. A rusty sign read, "Isolation ward staff only." "This is the area Keith said we shouldn't enter," Megan reminded me. "The floor isn't safe." But I had already placed my hand on the doorknob. An irresistible force compelled me to open it. The door creaked open with a long groan, revealing a pitch-black corridor with many small doors on either side. These were isolation rooms for late-stage tuberculosis patients. At the end of the corridor was an open area with beds lined up. "We shouldn't be here," Megan said, her voice full of worry. "The floor is creaking." She was right. The wooden floor beneath our feet creaked with every step as if it could collapse at any moment, but I couldn't stop. The cough led me deeper into the darkness. "Kyle," Megan called, "look down at the floor." I shone my flashlight down and saw something terrifying. The floor was so rotten that the lower floor was visible through the cracks. We were walking on a thin layer of precarious wood that could collapse at any moment. Finally, reason prevailed. "We have to go back," I said, turning around. Just then, the laser beam behind us was interrupted. A straight red line suddenly vanished. The camera recorded an unbelievable sight. The laser was not just blocked, but bent, as if warped by a human figure passing through. "Something's coming towards us," Megan said, her voice full of fear. We had no choice but to go deeper into the isolation ward, away from whatever was approaching us. The floor creaked violently with every step, but fear compelled us to continue. As we reached the open area at the end of the corridor, the cough stopped. Instead, a suffocating silence enveloped us. "Oh my God," Megan whispered, shining her flashlight around. The open area wasn't a patient room as I thought. It was a surgical room with a rusty metal operating table in the center. Around it were shelves with old medicine bottles and rusted medical instruments. On the walls, reddish-brown stains, probably dried blood, formed strange patterns. "Megan," I said, pointing to the stains. "Look." Under the flashlight, the stains formed familiar characters, identical to the ones I had seen at Rolling Hills. The characters Sharon had given me on the vanished slip of paper. "What is that?" Megan asked, approaching to see more clearly. "A kind of language," I replied. "I've seen it before at Rolling Hills." Then suddenly, the floor beneath Megan collapsed with a terrible crack. She screamed, flailing her arms in the air as she tried to regain her balance. "Megan!" I lunged towards her, reaching out. I grabbed her wrist just as she was about to fall into the dark hole below. "Pull me up," she screamed, her voice full of terror. I tried to pull her up, but the floor beneath my feet also began to creak ominously, threatening to collapse at any moment. "I can't hold on much longer," I said, feeling my grip slipping. "Megan, hold on." Then from the darkness behind us, a cold hand placed itself on my shoulder. I spun around, only to see the faint figure of a nurse in a white uniform, Nurse Mary, with the wound on her neck. But instead of pushing me down, she knelt and reached out, grabbing Megan's other arm. Together, we pulled Megan up from the hole, back onto the intact section of the floor. "Thank you," I gasped, turning to where Nurse Mary had stood, but she had vanished. "What happened?" Megan asked, trembling as she stood up. "Mary helped me pull you up," I said, knowing it sounded insane. Megan looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "Kyle, no one was there. You pulled me up alone." I didn't argue. Instead, I pointed to the operating table. "Look." On the operating table, a yellowed piece of paper appeared, a piece of paper that hadn't been there before. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a page from a patient's medical record with a name circled, Mary Hillenberg, head nurse. Beside it was a death note, October 29, 1928, cause of death, suicide by hanging. Additional note, wounds on neck inconsistent with hanging. "This is Nurse Mary's record," I said, handing the paper to Megan. "How did it get here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think she wants us to know the truth," I replied. "She didn't commit suicide, she was murdered." Megan shook her head, skeptical. "Kyle, you can't seriously believe that." She stopped mid-sentence as the dry cough sounded again. This time, it came from behind us, from the direction of the exit. "Don't follow the cough," I repeated, recalling Keith's warning. But that's the only way out, Megan pointed out. We had no other choice. We had to go back the way we came, past whatever had disrupted the laser beam. Hold my hand tightly, I said to Megan, and be careful with every step. We slowly moved back into the corridor, each step making the floor creak alarmingly. The cough seemed to move with us, always ahead, leading the way. As we approached where the laser was set up, we saw it. The red laser beam had completely vanished. The device was still there, but the light was off. Dead battery, Megan suggested. No way, I shook my head. I just put in fresh batteries. We carefully moved through the laser area, half expecting to be attacked by something invisible, but nothing happened. We continued to move. The cough still echoed ahead, leading us back to the main corridor. When we finally escaped the isolation ward, I felt as if an invisible burden had been lifted from my shoulders. The air seemed lighter, easier to breathe. We should leave this floor, Megan said, her face still panicked. I nodded, but as we turned towards the stairs, I heard it. The dry cough, this time coming from room 502. Mary still wants to show us something, I said, hesitating. Kyle, no, Megan grabbed my arm. We almost died, that's enough. But I couldn't ignore it. You go down first, I said. I'll go back to room 502 one more time and then come right down. Megan looked at me intently, then sighed. I'll go with you, but this is the last time. We returned to room 502. This time, it wasn't empty. On the chair by the window, an old ledger appeared. A ledger that hadn't been there when we left. I picked it up, carefully opening it. It was Mary Hillenberg's diary, with pages written in hurried, messy handwriting. October 4, 1928, Dr. H is conducting experiments on patients in the isolation ward. No one is allowed in there, but I heard screams. I have to do something. October 12, 1928, I saw them, the characters on the morgue wall. Dr. H says it's the language of the dead, and he's learning how to communicate with them. This is insane. October 20, 1928, I have collected evidence. Tomorrow I will go to the police. What is happening here must be stopped. The last page was written in a different hand, clearly not Mary's. October 29, 1928, Nurse Hillenberg met with an unfortunate accident. She will no longer cause trouble. The experiments will continue. Dr. H, I mumbled. Mary didn't commit suicide, Megan said, reading over my shoulder. She was murdered because she discovered Dr. H's experiments. And now she's trying to warn everyone, I said. That's why she lured people to the isolation ward, so they could see the truth. But she saved me, Megan realized. She didn't want to harm us. No, she wants us to tell her story, I said, carefully placing the diary in my backpack. And we will. As we left room 502, I felt a cold hand gently touch my shoulder. I turned, but no one was there. Thank you, Mary, I whispered into the air. The cough was no longer heard. Instead, a strange sense of peace enveloped us as we left Waverly Hills. The next morning, when we met Keith to return the keys, I gave him Mary's diary. I think you should have this, I said. It might help explain what truly happened to Mary Hillenberg. Keith looked at the diary, then at me with a knowing gaze. She showed you, didn't she? The characters on the wall. I nodded, surprised. You know about them. I've worked here 15 years, Keith said. I've seen many things, but Mary, she only shows those she trusts. She saved Megan, I said. Keith nodded, not surprised. She's not the evil ghost everyone thinks. She just wants the truth to be exposed. And the characters, I asked, what are they? Keith looked at me intently. You've seen them in other places, haven't you? I nodded, recalling Rolling Hills. That's the message, Keith said, from the other side, and if you continue on this path, you will learn how to read them. As we left Waverly Hills, I couldn't help but think about all the places I had been. LaLaurie Mansion, Myrtles, Eastern State, Stanley, Winchester, Rolling Hills, and all the places I would go. I had started this journey as a skeptical YouTuber, seeking views and subscribers, but now I felt I was becoming something else. A messenger for the dead, a storyteller for souls who couldn't speak for themselves. And as we drove to the Villisca Axe Murder House in Iowa, where an entire family was murdered in their sleep in 1912, I wondered if the mysterious characters would appear again, and if I would finally learn how to read them. But one thing I knew for sure. Every haunted house has a story that needs to be told, and I had become the chosen one to tell it. Part 9. Villisca, Iowa, a small, peaceful town until the fateful night of June 9, 1912. I said into the camera, my voice low to create a somber atmosphere. That night, the entire Moore family, 6 people, along with 2 neighborhood girls, were brutally murdered in their sleep by an axe murderer. The culprit was never caught, and this house, where the horrific crime occurred, is said to be where the spirits of the victims still linger. Cut, Megan yelled, lowering the camera. Great, Kyle, but you don't need to do that voice. The story is chilling enough already. I chuckled softly, wiping sweat from my brow. July in Iowa was stiflingly hot, and the jacket I wore to hide the muddy child's handprint from Winchester wasn't helping. I need a little drama, I replied. Subscribers exceeded 12 million after the Waverly Hills video. Viewers are expecting something special. Megan looked at me with a worried expression. Since the experience at Waverly Hills 2 weeks ago, she had begun to believe what I told her about ghosts, about the mysterious characters, about me seemingly being chosen by the departed souls to tell their stories. What do you think this house will hold? She asked, looking up at the rather ordinary-looking white 2-story house before us. I don't know, I answered honestly. But this is the most horrific unsolved murder case in Iowa's history. 8 people, including 6 children, killed in their sleep. If any place is haunted, this is it. We were greeted by Martha, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair and sad eyes. She was the current guide for the house, which had become a historical site and ghost hunting location. Phantom Archives, Martha nodded as we introduced ourselves. I watched your video about LaLaurie Mansion. Very impressive. Though I must say, many visitors have reported even scarier experiences than what you presented. I smiled, used to this kind of comment. We have to consider what can be shown on YouTube without being taken down. Martha looked at me with an understanding gaze. Of course, so what do you want to know about this house? Anything you can share, I replied, especially about reported phenomena. Martha led us into the house, a modest 2-story structure carefully preserved to look as it did at the time of the murders. The interior was simple with Victorian-era furniture and antique iron beds. Most of the phenomena occur on the 2nd floor, where the victims were killed, Martha explained. Visitors report hearing children crying, footsteps, and occasionally the sound of an axe hitting wood. I shuddered, imagining the horrific scene that had unfolded within these walls. But the strangest phenomenon, Martha continued, lowering her voice, is the sound of wood being sawed from the backyard. No one can explain where it comes from. And sometimes, people see bloodstains appear near the dining table, bloodstains that cannot be washed away. And have you seen or heard anything? Megan asked. Martha hesitated, then nodded. Once, when I was cleaning the Moore couple's bedroom, I felt someone standing right behind me, a cold breath on my neck. When I turned, no one was there, but the display AXA replica of the murder weapon had moved from the table to the bed. Were you scared? I asked. No, Martha shook her head. I don't think the spirits here are malicious. I think they just want justice, want the perpetrator to be found. Martha handed us keys and a copy of the police case file. This is all the information we have about the case. There are also some theories, but nothing is certain. I'll be back at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. When Martha left, we began setting up our equipment. I decided to place cameras in the master bedroom, where the Moore couple was killed, and in the room of the 4 Moore children. Megan set up audio recorders throughout the house, hoping to capture any unusual sounds. I want to try an experiment, I said, taking out the copy of the case file. We'll tape these documents to the living room wall. If the spirits are looking for justice, this might provoke a response. Megan nodded, helping me tape the documents to the wall. They included crime scene reports, photos of the victims, and a list of suspects. As the sun set, the atmosphere in the house seemed to change. From warm and welcoming, it became heavy and suffocating. I set up a temperature gauge in the living room and began to monitor it. Temperature stable at 76 degF, I noted. We'll see if there's any sudden change. We sat in the living room, waiting for night to fully descend. Megan, always practical, had brought sandwiches and water. I feel something different about this place, she admitted as we ate dinner. Unlike the other places we've been, it's sadder, more mournful, if that makes sense. I nodded, understanding what she meant. This wasn't a mental hospital where patients were abused or a grand mansion with a dark history. This was a family home where people were living normal lives until tragedy struck. As the clock struck 10:00 p.m., we began our actual investigation. I decided to start with the bedroom of the 4 more children on the second floor. It was a small room with 2 iron beds, where the 4 children Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul were killed in their sleep. "I'm feeling a cold spot," Megan said as we entered. She pointed to the temperature gauge in her hand. The temperature dropped from 76 deg F to 68 deg F just in this room. "No draft," I remarked, checking the closed window. "This isn't normal." I took out a small flashlight and placed it in the center of the floor. "If someone is here, please spin this flashlight." We waited, but nothing happened. Megan began to ask questions into the air. "Are you here? Herman, Catherine, Boyd, Paul?" No response, but the temperature continued to drop to 58 deg F, so cold we could see our breath. "We should check the Moore couple's room," I suggested, feeling uncomfortable in the cold room. The master bedroom was right next door. Josiah and Sarah Moore were killed here, the first in the family to encounter the murderer. On the table was a replica of the axe believed to be the murder weapon, not a real axe, just a display model. "The temperature here is normal," Megan remarked, looking at the gauge. 76 deg F, I set up an infrared camera on a tripod, pointing towards the bed. "We'll leave this camera running overnight." As we prepared to leave the room, I heard a small sound, like a gentle scraping from under the bed. "Megan," I whispered. "Did you hear that?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "Something's under the bed." I knelt down, shining my flashlight into the dark space beneath the iron bed. Nothing but dust and old wooden floorboards. "Strange," I mumbled, standing up. "I'm sure I heard something." I stopped mid-sentence when I saw that the axe on the table was gone. "Megan," I whispered, pointing to the empty table. "Where's the axe?" She turned, her face pale. "It was right there a minute ago." We looked around the room, our hearts pounding. Then I saw it. The axe was now on the bed, exactly where Mr. Moore's head would have been on that fateful night. "How?" Megan stammered. "We didn't take our eyes off it." I approached the bed, carefully picking up the axe. It was unusually cold, as if it had just been taken from a refrigerator. "We should go back to the living room," I suggested, placing the axe back on the table. As we went downstairs, a strange sound came from the backyard. The steady sound of a saw, as if someone was cutting wood late at night. "That's the sound Martha mentioned," Megan whispered, clinging to my arm. "We should check it out," I decided, though every instinct told me to stay inside. We opened the back door and stepped into the yard. The night was pitch black. Only the faint moonlight pierced through the tree branches. The sawing continued, seemingly coming from a small shed at the end of the yard. "Is anyone there?" I called, my voice echoing in the still night. The sawing stopped abruptly, the silence that followed even more terrifying than the sound. "We should check the shed," I said, turning on my flashlight. The shed was a small wooden structure, dilapidated with age. The door was ajar, creaking in the light breeze. I pushed it open, shining my flashlight inside. No one was there, just some old tools, a saw, a hammer, and other gardening implements hanging on the wall. But the strange thing was that the saw on the wall was new and shiny, unlike the other tools that were rusted and dusty. "It looks like it's just been used," Megan remarked, looking at the saw intently. I approached to examine it, but when I touched it, a chilling sensation ran through my hand. I pulled my hand back, seeing a red mark on my finger, not blood, but a reddish powder. "What is this?" Megan asked, looking at my finger. "I don't know," I replied, wiping it on a tissue. "But we should go back inside. I have a bad feeling about this place." When we returned to the house, I noticed that the temperature in the living room had dropped significantly, from 76 deg F to 58 deg F, even though it was still a warm summer night outside. Inside the house was cold as winter. "Something's wrong," Megan said, shivering. "I feel like we're being watched." I nodded, sensing the same thing. "Let's check the case documents we taped to the wall." We approached the wall, and what we saw made our blood run cold. On the copy of the case file, a new line of text had appeared, written in the same red powder I had seen on the saw. "Don't forget us." "How?" Megan stammered, backing away from the wall. "This can't be happening." I approached to examine the red powder. It wasn't blood, but it had a strange metallic smell, like dried blood. And as I looked closer at the documents, I noticed a detail I had previously overlooked. One of the suspects, a traveling minister named George Kelly, had once been a carpenter before becoming a minister. "Megan," I called. "Look, Kelly, one of the main suspects, was a carpenter, and we just heard the sound of sawing wood." "You think it was him?" She finished my thought. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but it seems like someone is trying to tell us something about the perpetrator." Suddenly, all the lights in the house went out, leaving us in complete darkness. I turned on my flashlight, only to find it wasn't working either. "Does your flashlight work?" I asked Megan. "No," she replied, her voice trembling. "Nothing is working." In the darkness, I felt something touch my shoulder. A small, cold hand. I spun around but saw nothing in the thick darkness. "Someone touched me," I whispered. "Me too," Megan replied, her voice choked. As if children are standing around us." Then, from the nearby dining room, we heard the gentle scraping of chairs, as if someone was sitting at the dining table, followed by the soft clinking of plates and cutlery, as if an invisible family was having dinner. "The Moore family," I whispered. "I think we're witnessing the last moments before they went to bed." And I didn't need to finish the sentence, we both knew what happened next. Suddenly the noises stopped. In the strange silence, a faint child's giggle sounded from upstairs, followed by faint footsteps on the stairs. "They're going to bed," Megan whispered. And then from a distance, we heard another sound, heavy footsteps slowly approaching the house. The creak of the back door opening, and the footsteps continued, now inside the house. "The killer!" I exclaimed, a wave of terror washing over my body. "We're witnessing the murder happening again. We have to do something," Megan said, her voice full of horror. "We can't just stand here." And she stopped as the lights suddenly flickered back on, blinding us. When our vision returned, we realized we were standing in the perfectly normal living room. No footsteps, no children's voices, nothing. But on the dining table, which had been empty before, there was now a long red streak. Not red powder this time, but a wet, bright red substance that looked terrifyingly like real blood. "I think we should leave here," Megan said, her voice choked. I nodded. But as we turned towards the front door, I noticed an additional line of text had appeared on the case documents, not in red powder, but in normal black ink. "Kelly knew how to use a saw. Look in the church house." "A clue," I whispered. "They're trying to help us find the killer." "After over a century," Megan asked skeptically, "what do you think?" "I think we need to find out more about George Kelly," I decided, "and about the church where he once preached." We spent the rest of the night in the car, not daring to return to the house. The next morning, when Martha returned, we told her about our experiences, though omitting some of the scariest details. "Kelly," Martha nodded as we mentioned the name. "He was always a top suspect, a traveling minister who held a sermon at the local church the night before the murders. The Moore family attended that sermon." "And that church, does it still exist?" I asked. "It's still there, a few blocks away," Martha replied, "though it's been renovated many times since then." Before leaving Villisca, we visited that church, a small stone building with a bell tower. The current pastor, a young man named Ben, enthusiastically shared the church's history, including Kelly's sermon. "There's an interesting detail," Ben said as we prepared to leave. When the church was renovated in the 1950s, they found a secret compartment under the pulpit, and inside was an old axe and a saw. My heart stopped. What did they do with those tools? "They were sent to the police, but after so many years, no evidence could be found," Ben shrugged. "They are currently stored in the town museum." As we drove away from Villisca, heading towards the Crescent Hotel in Arkansas, I couldn't stop thinking about the children in that house. Not just the children who died, but the small, cold hands that touched us in the darkness, trying to guide us to the truth. "Do you think we helped them?" Megan asked as the small town disappeared behind us. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I think they helped us understand that sometimes the past doesn't just haunt, it seeks redemption." In our video about the Villisca Axe murder house, I only mentioned the anomalous temperature phenomena and the strange sounds from the shed. But I had sent an anonymous letter to the local police, suggesting they re-examine the tools found in the church. And sometimes, I still feel those small, cold hands gently touch my shoulder in the darkness, not to frighten, but to thank. Part 10. Welcome to the Crescent Hotel, where you can check in as a guest and stay forever. I concluded my introduction to the camera, wincing slightly at the cliché. My YouTube channel had surpassed 15 million subscribers after the Villisca video, and sponsors were demanding more shocking content. "Cut," Megan yelled, lowering the camera. "Come on, Kyle, stay forever. You can do better than that." I smiled tiredly. After 6 haunted locations, I was starting to feel exhausted, not just physically but mentally. The dreams of mysterious characters were becoming more intense, and the muddy child's handprint from Winchester was still on my wrist, darker than ever. And sometimes I thought I saw it move. "I'm running out of ideas," I admitted. "Maybe we should just put out a more factual version, tell people what really happened in these places." "And get the video taken down by YouTube for disturbing content?" "No way," Megan shook her head, adjusting the equipment. "Anyway, what's special about this hotel?" I looked up at the intricate Gothic stone building before us. The Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, built in the 1880s, has gone through many ups and downs, from a luxury resort to a girls' school, and finally, a fraudulent hospital run by Norman Baker, a quack doctor who claimed he could cure cancer. "This is one of America's most famous haunted hotels," I explained. "Many ghosts are said to appear here, from a stone mason who fell to his death during construction to the bride in room 218 and the cancer patients who died at Baker's hands." "And which room are we staying in?" Megan asked, looking up at the tall windows. "Room 218, the bride's room," I replied. "But unlike other places, this is still an active hotel. We won't have access to the entire building, only the public areas and our room." "So we'll have normal guests around," Megan said, sounding relieved. "That changes the energy." "Exactly," I nodded. "But it also means we have to be more discreet with our equipment. We don't want to disturb other guests with bright lights and beeping sounds in the middle of the night." We were greeted by Andrea, the hotel manager, an elegant woman with reddish-brown hair and a professional smile. "Phantom Archives," she exclaimed as we introduced ourselves. "I'm a fan of your channel. Your Eastern State video really kept me up all night." "Thank you," I smiled. "We're thrilled to be here." "Room 218 is ready for you," Andrea said, handing me an old-fashioned metal key instead of a modern keycard. We still keep the original keys for the haunted rooms to maintain the historical atmosphere. "Oh, so you believe in the ghost stories too?" Megan asked. Andrea looked around as if to ensure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. "I've worked here for 5 years. I've seen things, especially in room 218 and room 419, Baker's room." "What kind of phenomena?" I asked, taking out my phone to take notes. "In room 218, guests report feeling someone sit on the bed, furniture being moved, and sometimes a female figure in a white dress," Andrea replied. "In room 419, people hear bottles clinking as if Baker is still mixing his cancer cures." "What about the public areas?" I continued. "The Crystal Ballroom," Andrea said. "People report hearing music and laughter from the hotel's early days. And of course, the basement, where Baker performed his surgeries." "Can we go into the basement?" Megan asked, ready for adventure. "There's a basement tour at 10:00 p.m., Andrea said. "I'll sign you up, and I can let you into the Crystal Ballroom after closing hours, around midnight, when events have concluded." "Excellent," I thanked her. "Any advice for staying in room 218? Andrea hesitated. "Just don't tease the bride. She doesn't like questions about her death. And if you feel someone sitting on the bed, don't panic, she's just curious." With that advice, we went up to room 218, a spacious corner room with Victorian furniture and a stunning view of the valley. Unlike the abandoned places we usually explored, this room was cozy and luxurious, with a king-size bed, antique furniture, and soft lighting. "Doesn't look very scary," Megan remarked, putting down her bag. "Actually, it's quite nice." "The most beautiful places often hide the darkest secrets," I replied, beginning to set up equipment. "But I agree, it's a nice change from rotting asylums and abandoned prisons." I installed a small infrared camera on a bookshelf, pointed towards the bed, and an audio recorder under the desk. Not too much equipment. We didn't want to turn the room into a laboratory. We have a few hours before the basement tour, Megan said, looking at her watch. Want to explore the hotel? We spent the afternoon wandering around the Crescent Hotel, learning about its rich history. Built in 1886 as a luxury resort, it was once a destination for Victorian high society. After going bankrupt, it became the Crescent College and Conservatory for young women from 1908 to 1924. But its darkest period came in the 1930s when Norman Baker bought the building and converted it into a cancer hospital. Baker, without medical qualifications, defrauded hundreds of desperate patients with fake treatments, causing many to die in agony. It's horrifying, Megan mumbled as we looked at old photos in the hotel's small display room. Imagine you're dying of cancer, putting all your hope in a fraud. And then dying in a strange hotel, knowing you've been deceived, I continued. No wonder their spirits can't move on. In the evening, we joined the basement tour. About 20 other tourists participated, mostly ghost enthusiasts like us. The guide, a middle-aged man named Jack, led us down a narrow staircase to the basement. This is where Norman Baker performed his surgeries, Jack explained, leading us through dark corridors. He claimed he could cure cancer without surgery, but many patients reported painful procedures performed here. The basement was cold and damp, with stone walls and low ceilings. Small rooms, once treatment rooms, lined the corridors. In one room, an old operating table had been restored for display. I took out my EMF meter and began to scan around, trying not to disturb the other tourists. As we passed what was believed to be Baker's medicine room, the device suddenly let out a beep, high EMF readings. I whispered to Megan. 5.8, much higher than normal. Could be old wiring, she suggested, ever practical. There's no wiring in this room, Jack said, clearly having overheard us. In fact, this is where we usually record the most activity. Guests often report hearing bottles clinking as if Baker is still mixing his medicines. I stepped into the room, feeling the air significantly colder than in the corridor. On wooden shelves were old glass bottles and medical equipment, restored to resemble what Baker had used. Do you feel it? Megan whispered. Like someone is watching us. I nodded, sensing the same thing, an invisible presence, not exactly hostile, but certainly not friendly. Dr. Baker, I called softly, trying not to disturb the other tourists. Are you still continuing your work here? No clear response, but the EMF meter in my hand suddenly spiked to 8.7, then returned to normal. See, Jack smiled. He doesn't like being called doctor. Baker had no medical degree. That's one of the reasons he was arrested for practicing medicine without a license. We continued the tour, but I couldn't help but feel that something had followed us from the medicine room. A cold, observing presence, watching our every move. When the tour ended and we returned to the lobby area, I noticed a strange detail. My reflection in a large mirror seemed to lag slightly behind my movements, as if there was a small delay. Megan, I called, look in the mirror and wave. She did, then frowned. Something's not right. The reflection is a little slower, right? I asked. Not just that, she whispered. Look behind us in the mirror. I looked closely and felt my blood run cold. While the lobby behind us was empty in reality, in the mirror, a faint figure stood a few feet behind us. A man in a white suit with a purple tie. Baker, I whispered, recalling his photo in the display room. Norman Baker was known for always wearing a white suit and purple tie. I spun around, but no one was behind us. When I looked back at the mirror, the figure had vanished. Did you see him? Megan asked, her eyes wide. Yes, I nodded, and I think he's watching us. After the tour, we returned to room 218 to rest before exploring the Crystal Ballroom at midnight. As we entered the room, I immediately felt something different. Someone has been in our room, Megan said, looking around. Furniture has been moved. She was right. The chair by the window now faced the bed, as if someone had pulled it out to sit down and observe. A bottle of water we left on the table had been moved to the bedside table. Could be housekeeping, I suggested, though I knew we had hung the Do Not Disturb sign before leaving. Did you check the camera? Megan asked. I quickly took out my laptop and uploaded the footage from the infrared camera. As we reviewed it, my heart stopped. The footage clearly showed the chair slowly moving, as if pulled by an invisible force. Then the water bottle floated from the table to the bedside table. "My God," Megan whispered, "it's happening right before our eyes." "And that's not all," I said, pointing to the corner of the room in the video. In a few frames, a faint white shadow appeared, the figure of a woman in a long dress. "The bride," we whispered in unison. "She's been here with us the whole time," Megan said, her voice trembling. I stood up, looking around the room with an eerie feeling that we were no longer alone. "Hello?" I called into the empty space. "We don't mean to intrude, we just want to understand." No clear response, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop significantly. "I'll get the temperature gauge," Megan said, reaching for her backpack. Just then, the lights in the room flickered once. Not an electrical fault, just the lights in our room, as if someone had flipped a switch off and then on again quickly. "She's acknowledging her presence," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. Megan took out the temperature gauge. 63 deg F, much colder than the rest of the hotel. "Bride," I called again. "We don't want to disturb you, we're just curious about your story." The lights flickered again, this time longer, leaving us in darkness for a few seconds before coming back on. "I think she's trying to talk to us," Megan said, "but how can we understand?" I thought for a moment, then took out a piece of paper and a pen. "We can try a simple method, a yes-no question, 1 light flicker for yes, 2 for no." I placed the paper on the table and wrote, "Are you the bride in room 218? The light flickered once. "Yes." My heart pounded faster. "Did you die in this room?" The light flickered once. "Yes." "Did you commit suicide?" I asked, recalling the story of a bride who hanged herself after her groom didn't show up on her wedding day. The light flickered twice. "No." Megan and I looked at each other in surprise. "But legend says." "Legend isn't always right," I reminded her. "Were you murdered?" I asked next. The light flickered once. "Yes." "Who killed you?" Megan asked, then immediately realized she had asked a question that couldn't be answered with a yes or no. But instead of the lights flickering, a cold gust of air blew through the room, and the paper on the table flew to the floor. When I picked it up, I noticed a faint mark had appeared on it. A single word, as if written by an invisible finger. "Baker." "Norman Baker?" I asked, astonished. "But he came here in the 1930s, and the legend of the bride dates back to the early 1900s. The light flickered twice. "No, not Norman." "Maybe another Baker?" Megan said. The light flickered once. "Yes." I tried to recall the hotel's history that Andrea had shared. "Right, Michael Baker, the hotel's architect. He was also one of the original investors." The light flickered once. "Yes." "Were you his fiancé?" Megan asked, trying to understand the story. The light flickered twice. "No." "So, who are you?" I asked, forgetting the yes-no rule. The light didn't flicker. Instead, a cold gust of air again blew through the room, strong enough to send papers flying from the table. And as they fell, another piece of paper with faint writing appeared. "Samantha, nurse." "You were a nurse?" I asked, recalling that before becoming Baker's Hospital, the hotel had once been a girls' school. The light flickered once. "Yes." "And Michael Baker killed you," Megan said, not as a question but as an affirmation. The light flickered once, more intensely, startling us. "Why?" I asked, again breaking the rule. But this time, instead of blowing papers, a strange phenomenon occurred. In the bathroom mirror, writing slowly appeared, as if written by a finger on the fogged glass. "I know his truth." "You discovered something about Michael Baker," I said, trying to understand. "And he killed you to keep it a secret." The light flickered once. "What's the truth?" Megan asked. No immediate response. Then slowly in the mirror another line of text appeared, "Missing children." I shuddered. He did something with missing children? The mirror began to fog up as if covered in thick steam. When it cleared again, a single word appeared, "Basement." Was the basement already there before Norman Baker came? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. The light flickered once. "Yes." "And Michael Baker did something with children in the basement," Megan said, her voice trembling. "You discovered it, and he killed you." The light flickered once, lasting longer. "We need to check the basement," I decided. "But not the tour area, there must be another part, an older part." The light flickered once as if confirming. As we prepared to leave the room for our scheduled appointment with Andrea in the Crystal Ballroom, I felt a cold hand gently touch my shoulder. I turned, but saw no one. "Thank you, Samantha," I said into the air. "We'll find the truth." The Crystal Ballroom was on the 4th floor of the hotel, a large space with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and crystal chandeliers. Andrea was waiting for us there as promised. "The entire space is yours until morning," she said, handing us a bunch of keys. "These are backup keys for some of the banquet rooms, kitchen, and storage." "Andrea," I asked as she prepared to leave, "have you ever heard of a nurse named Samantha who worked here?" Andrea stopped, looking at me with a strange gaze. "Samantha Wells, how do you know about her?" "She paid us a visit," I replied honestly. "In room 218. Andrea didn't seem surprised. "She worked here in the early 1920s when the building was a girls' school. She was found dead in room 218, officially a suicide, but there were always rumors that she was murdered by Michael Baker." Megan asked. Andrea frowned. "How do you know that? It's not in any official documents." "Just a guess," Megan quickly replied. "He was the architect, wasn't he?" "Yes, and one of the original investors," Andrea confirmed. "There were rumors that he had unhealthy relationships with some of the students. Samantha, as head nurse, might have discovered something." "And about the basement," I asked. "Did it exist before Norman Baker's time?" "Of course," Andrea nodded. "The entire tour area used to be storage and laundry, but there's an older section that's been sealed off for a long time. We don't take guests in there for safety reasons." "Can we see it?" I asked. "Just quickly, it would make great footage for the video." Andrea hesitated. "I'm not sure it's not safe." "We'll be careful," I promised, "and we won't mention that you allowed us in there." Finally, Andrea agreed. "The key labeled B3 will open the iron door at the end of the basement corridor, behind which is the oldest area of the building. But be careful, no one has been in there for years." After Andrea left, we spent an hour exploring the Crystal Ballroom with our equipment. Audio recorders picked up strange whispers, too faint to understand but clearly human voices. The EMF meter also recorded some hot spots near the antique mirrors, but our minds were elsewhere in the secret basement and the story of Samantha Wells. "We should go down there now," Megan suggested, "before we lose our nerve." We went down to the basement, which was now dark and quiet after the tour had ended. With our flashlights, we found the iron door at the end of the corridor that Andrea had described. Key B3 opened it with a rusty screech. Behind the door was a narrow corridor leading deeper underground. The air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of earth and mold. We slowly moved, each step echoing on the stone floor. "This place is even older than the rest of the building," I remarked, shining my flashlight on the rough stone walls. "Perhaps part of the original cellar." The corridor led to a heavy wooden door. It wasn't locked, but it took effort to push it open, as if it had been stuck for years. Inside was a large room with a vaulted ceiling and a stone floor. Along the walls were wooden shelves and rusty iron cabinets. In the center of the room was a long stone table that looked like an operating table. "This isn't a storage room or laundry room," Megan whispered. "This is a laboratory." I approached the stone table, shining my flashlight on its surface. Dark stains were still there, though faded with time bloodstains. "Michael Baker wasn't just an ordinary architect," I said. "He was an experimenter like Norman Baker later, but even worse." Megan opened one of the iron cabinets and gasped. Inside were ancient surgical instruments, scalpels, scissors, saws, and other tools I didn't recognize. "What happened here?" she whispered. I continued to explore the room, opening a large wooden cabinet in the far corner. Inside was a stack of old, tattered ledgers and documents, their leather covers cracked with age. I carefully took one out and opened it. It was Michael Baker's diary, written in small, neat handwriting, detailing his experiments. "My God," I whispered as I read. He was kidnapping children from the nearby town. Orphans, children no one would look for. He performed surgeries on them, experimenting with what he called the boundary between life and death. All this was happening while the building was a luxury hotel upstairs. Megan asked, horrified. "And then a girls' school," I continued, flipping through the pages. "He continued for decades until Samantha discovered it." I turned to the last page of the diary. Nurse Wells has become too curious. She followed me down here last night. She saw too much. Tomorrow, she will have an accident in room 218, another tragedy for the Crescent. So he killed her, Megan said. And covered it up as a suicide, I added, and no one knew the truth until now. Suddenly, a cold gust of air blew through the room, strong enough to extinguish our flashlights. In complete darkness, I felt a presence, not just one, but many. Megan, I whispered, we're not alone. When our flashlights came back on, I saw it. Small figures stood around us, faint but clearly the shapes of children. And in their midst, a woman in a nurse's uniform with a sad but peaceful face. Samantha, I whispered, and the children. The figure of Samantha approached us, reaching out as if to touch the diary in my hand. I held it out and felt a gentle weight as she touched it. You want us to bring it to light, I said, for the truth to be known. The figure nodded, then looked around the room with a sorrowful gaze. We'll do it, Megan promised. We'll make sure everyone knows what happened here. The figure of Samantha smiled, a small, relieved smile. Then slowly, she and the children began to fade, as if merging with the air, until we were once again alone. We just set them free, I whispered, by finding the truth. When we returned to room 218, the atmosphere in the room had changed. There was no longer a heavy feeling, only warmth and peace. The next morning, we gave the diary and other documents to Andrea. She looked at them with a stunned expression. I always knew there was something strange about that basement, she said, but I never imagined. This is the truth about Michael Baker, I said, and Samantha Wells's death. She didn't commit suicide. She was murdered because she discovered what Baker was doing. We will transfer these documents to the police and local historians, Andrea promised. Though it's too late to prosecute Baker, at least we can restore Samantha's honor. As we left the Crescent Hotel, I couldn't help but look back one last time. At the window of room 218, I thought I saw a face no longer sad, but peaceful and grateful. In our video about the Crescent Hotel, I only mentioned unusual EMP phenomena and strange noises in the Crystal Ballroom. But Andrea kept her promise. The story of Michael Baker and Samantha Wells was finally told, and a small commemorative plaque for Samantha was placed outside room 218. As we drove to the Whaley House in San Diego, I couldn't help but think about all the souls we had met on this journey. Not just those who had caused harm, but also those who had been harmed. Those who simply wanted their stories to be told. And I wondered how many other stories were waiting to be discovered, how many truths were waiting to be unveiled. Part 11. The Whaley House was built on what was once San Diego's public gallows, I said into the camera, my voice instinctively lowering. Built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley, this house is recognized by the U.S. Historical Landmark Bureau as America's first officially documented haunted house. Cut, Megan yelled, lowering the camera. You're trying too hard to be mysterious, Kyle. The story is scary enough already. I shrugged, smiling tiredly. The Crescent Hotel episode had hit 18 million views. Viewers were expecting something even more impressive. Perhaps because of the true story of Samantha Wells that we uncovered, Megan pointed out. Sometimes the truth is scarier than any ghost story we can make up. I looked up at the facade of the Whaley House, a two-story Greek revival-style house with red bricks and tall windows. Unlike the abandoned buildings we usually explored, this place was well-preserved and open as a museum. That meant we would have to share the space with other visitors, at least until closing time. There are at least 4 known ghosts here, I said, flipping through my research notebook. Yankee Jim Robinson, a thief hanged at the gallows before the house was built. Thomas and Anna Whaley, the owners of the house, and Violet Whaley, their daughter, who committed suicide after an unhappy marriage. Don't forget the dog, Megan added. Many people report hearing barking and feeling as if touched by an invisible dog. Right, the Whaley family dog, I nodded. One of the most common phenomena here. We were greeted by Lisa, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. She was the current museum director of the Whaley House. Phantom Archives, she nodded as we introduced ourselves. I watched your video about the Winchester Mystery House. Interesting, though there's a lot you left out. We have to be selective about what we can put on YouTube, I replied reflexively. But thank you for allowing us to film after closing hours. We often have ghost hunting groups, Lisa said, though most of them aren't very successful. They bring too much equipment and make too much noise. The spirits here prefer respect and quiet. We'll do our best, Megan promised. Just a few cameras and microphones, no bright lights. Lisa led us on a tour of the house, pointing out the rooms said to have the most paranormal activity. The parlor is where people often hear footsteps going up the stairs, even though no one is there. The master bedroom is where Thomas and Anna Whaley often appear. And Violet's room, where she committed suicide, has a distinct perfume smell on special days. What about Yankee Jim? I asked, recalling the story of the hanged thief. The living room, Lisa replied, where the gallows once stood. People report feeling as if someone is choking them when standing there. And we're free to explore after 8:00 p.m., Megan asked. That's right, I'll stay until 9:00 to answer any questions. After that, you'll be alone until 6:00 a.m. Lisa handed us a bunch of keys. Just don't try to summon Yankee Jim with a Ouija board. He doesn't like it. As Lisa left to attend to other visitors, we began setting up our equipment. An infrared camera in the master bedroom, one in Violet's room, and one in the living room where Yankee Jim was said to appear. We also placed an infrasound microphone on the main staircase to capture the footsteps many people had reported. As the sun set and the last visitors left, the house became strangely quiet. The soft light from the restored oil lamps cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the creaking of the old wooden floors echoed through the empty rooms. I'll set up the sensitive mic in the parlor, I told Megan. Can you check the EMF meter in the living room? We split up, each carrying our equipment. The parlor was a small space with a red velvet sofa and a large mirror on the wall. I placed the microphone down and turned it on. Is anyone here? I called softly. I'm Kyle Porter. I don't mean to disturb. I just want to talk. No response, except for the faint sound of wind blowing through the window. I took out my UV flashlight and scanned around the room, looking for any traces invisible to the naked eye. Under the purple light, a handprint appeared on the mirror, not a normal greasy fingerprint from visitors, but a complete handprint, as if someone had placed a wet hand on it. I approached to get a closer look and realized it was a child's handprint. Interesting, I mumbled, photographing the image. The Whaley family had many children, and there were reports of child activity in the house. Kyle, I heard Megan call from the living room. You should see this. I quickly went to her and found her standing in the middle of the room. The EMF meter in her hand was beeping continuously with an unusually high reading of 7.3 mg. This isn't normal, she said. There's no power source nearby, and it's only happening in this area. Right where the gallows once stood, I said. Yankee Jim, are you here? The moment I spoke the name, the EMF reading spiked to 9.8, then dropped to 0.2, almost nothing. You don't like that name, do you? I asked, recalling that Yankee Jim was the nickname given to James Robinson, the hanged thief. The EMF reading rose to 5.4, not as high as before, but still significant. James, I tried again. James Robinson. The reading spiked to 8.9, held for a few seconds, then returned to normal. He prefers to be called by his real name, Megan remarked. That's quite interesting. James, I called again. We don't mean to offend, we just want to understand your story. No response on the EMF meter, but I suddenly felt a strange sensation in my neck, as if a thin rope was gently tightening around it. Not painful, but tight enough for me to notice. Megan, I whispered, not daring to move. I'm feeling something around my neck. She looked at me, her eyes wide. Your neck is red, as if I'm being hanged, I said, the tightening sensation increasing. I stepped back from the area, and immediately the sensation vanished. Yankee, I'm sorry, James Robinson, I said, rubbing my neck. I think you're showing us what happened to you. We decided to leave the living room and check the master bedroom where Thomas and Anna Whaley were said to appear. The room was decorated in 19th century style with a large four-poster bed, an oak wardrobe, and a dressing table with a large mirror. Thomas and Anna Whaley lived a happy life here, I said, recalling my research. He was a successful merchant, and they had a large family. After he died, she remained in the house until her own passing. Unlike the other tragic stories we usually encounter, Megan remarked, so why do they still remain? Perhaps because they were so attached to the house, I guessed, or perhaps to protect their daughter, Violet. I took out an EVP recorder and placed it on the dressing table. This device was designed to pick up sounds imperceptible to the human ear and convert them into understandable voices. "Thomas, Anna," I called. "We are respectful visitors to your home. We wonder if you can speak to us." We waited in silence, listening for any response through the device. Initially, there was only static, but after a few minutes, a small, faint voice spoke. "Welcome, guests." My heart pounded faster. "Is that you, Thomas Whaley?" A pause then. "Yes, my house." "It's a beautiful house," Megan said. "We're happy to be here." "Careful, James is angry." "James Robinson?" I asked. "Why is he angry?" "Unfair, hanged innocent." Megan and I looked at each other. "He's saying Robinson was innocent. Evidence hidden." "Who hid the evidence?" I asked, feeling a surge of excitement. "Who framed James?" No response, except for static. Then slowly, the temperature in the room dropped from 72 deg F to 58 deg F in just a few seconds, making our breath condense into white clouds. "Thomas," I called again. "Anna." "Necklace, fine necklace." "Necklace," Megan repeated. "What necklace are you talking about?" "Anna's secret jewelry box." I looked around the room, my eyes stopping at a small jewelry box on the dressing table. Perhaps he's talking about that box. We approached the jewelry box, a display item secured with a small chain to prevent visitors from opening it. False bottom," Megan repeated. "Does the box have a false bottom?" "Evidence, necklace, innocent." I looked at the jewelry box intently. It was behind a protective glass, unreachable. "We can't open it, Thomas. It's a museum artifact." "Lisa, tell Lisa." "Lisa, she wants us to tell Lisa about the box," Megan asked. "Yes, Justice, James." The EVP recorder went dead, even though the battery was still full. The temperature in the room gradually returned to normal, and the heavy feeling vanished. "This is incredible," I said. "It seems Thomas and Anna Whaley are trying to help James Robinson prove his innocence after over a century. A necklace in a jewelry box with a false bottom." Megan mused. "Perhaps some evidence related to James's case." We decided to continue exploring and moved to Violet Whaley's room, Thomas and Anna's daughter, who committed suicide after a short and unhappy marriage. Violet's room was smaller than the master bedroom, with a single bed, a dressing table, and a window overlooking the backyard garden. A faint scent wafted through the air, lavender and roses. "Her perfume," Megan remarked, taking a deep breath. Just as Lisa said. I took out another EVP recorder and placed it on the dressing table. "Violet, are you here? We would love to talk to you." No response through the device, but the perfume scent became stronger, as if someone had just sprayed more into the air. "We know your story," I said gently. "About your unhappy marriage and how it ended. We're very sorry about that." Still no response, but a small sound came from the dressing table, as if someone was opening a drawer. I approached and saw that the top drawer of the dressing table was slightly ajar, even though it had been locked when we entered. I carefully opened it and found an old, yellowed piece of paper. "Megan," I called, "look at this." She approached as I gently took out the paper. It was a handwritten letter, faded with time but still legible. "Dearest Violet, I know our marriage is over, but my love for you will never fade. I was wrong not to protect you from gossip and scandal. I hope one day you can forgive me. Always yours, George Bertolatch." "Her ex-husband," I said, recalling my research. "They divorced after only 2 weeks of marriage, and rumors of the failed marriage drove Violet to despair to the point of suicide." "But this letter," Megan said, looking closely at the paper, "it shows he still loved her. Maybe it wasn't his fault as everyone thought." I placed the letter back in the drawer, feeling as if I was intruding on a private moment. Perhaps Violet wants us to know the truth, that George wasn't as bad as history described him. As we prepared to leave the room, the perfume scent intensified, and a warm, almost grateful feeling enveloped us. "Thank you, Violet," I said softly. We spent the rest of the night exploring other rooms in the house, recording some minor phenomena: dog barking from the kitchen, faint footsteps on the stairs, and once, children's giggles from an empty room. When dawn broke, Lisa returned to pick us up. We told her about our experiences, especially the message from Thomas Whaley about the jewelry box and James Robinson. That's fascinating, Lisa said, clearly intrigued. We've never opened that box because it's a valuable artifact, but if there could be historical evidence inside. He said it has a false bottom, I reiterated, and a necklace that could prove James Robinson's innocence. Lisa thought for a moment. I'll talk to the board of directors. Perhaps we can arrange a careful inspection with conservation specialists present. We also mentioned George Bertolacci's letter in Violet's room. Lisa nodded, not surprised. That's one of our little secrets, she admitted. That drawer always opens when special visitors come. We think Violet wants to restore George's reputation. He was blamed a lot for her death, but perhaps the truth is more complex. As we left the Whaley house, I couldn't help but look back one last time. At the second-story window, I thought I saw a woman in a Victorian dress, nodding gently at us. In our video about the Whaley house, I only mentioned unusual EMP phenomena and strange EVP recordings. But 2 weeks after our visit, Lisa called with exciting news. They had opened the jewelry box and found a secret compartment at the bottom. Inside was an antique necklace with a small piece of paper stating that it belonged to the real woman who stole the horse James Robinson was accused of stealing. And as we drove to the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, I couldn't help but think about how spirits not only seek attention, but also seek justice and redemption, even after more than a century. Part 12. Kate Morgan, a mysterious young woman who checked out permanently, I said into the camera, my voice dropping to create a somber atmosphere. And according to rumors, she still roams the hotel's hallways, still wearing her distinctive black dress, the origin of her nickname, the Lady in Black. Cut, Megan yelled, lowering the camera. Good one, Kyle, much more natural than before. Thanks, I nodded, looking up at the imposing building before us. Unlike the abandoned houses and mental hospitals we usually explored, the Hotel del Coronado was a functioning 5-star resort with guests, staff, and a dazzlingly luxurious ambience. I still can't believe they allowed us to film here, Megan said, adjusting her equipment. Luxury hotels usually don't want to be associated with ghost stories. On the contrary, I replied, the Del actually capitalizes on the legend of Kate Morgan. They have ghost tour and books about her in the gift shop. So what's her story? Megan asked. Although I knew she had read our research, this was just a way for us to record information for the video. Kate Morgan, 24, arrived at this hotel in November 1892, I explained. She registered under an assumed name, looking sad and anxious. According to hotel staff, she was waiting for a gentleman, perhaps her husband or lover. After 5 days of waiting, she was found dead on the steps leading to the beach, with a gunshot wound to the head. Suicide? Megan asked. That was the official conclusion, I nodded. But there are many other theories, that she was murdered by the man she was waiting for, or even by an abortion doctor after a failed procedure. And now she haunts this hotel, Megan said, looking up at the arched windows, especially room 3327, the room she stayed in. Exactly, I confirmed, and we'll be staying in that room tonight. We were greeted by Marcus, the hotel's public relations director, a stylish young man in a neat suit with a friendly smile. Phantom Archives, he exclaimed as we introduced ourselves. It's great to have you here. Your Crescent Hotel video was fantastic, especially the part about Samantha. Thank you, I smiled. And thanks for allowing us to film here, especially in room 3327. The Del is very proud of its history, both tangible and intangible, Marcus said with a knowing smile. We call it our haunted heritage. Room 3327 is the most requested room in the hotel. Do people report anything there? Megan asked, ready for the investigation. Oh, countless things, Marcus nodded. Lights and TVs turning on and off by themselves, footsteps, the feeling of someone sitting on the bed. And sometimes, the reflection of a woman in black in the mirror. Some guests even report hearing whispers in Spanish, even though Kate wasn't Spanish. Spanish, I frowned. That's an interesting detail. The Del has a long history with Mexico, Marcus explained. We're only a few miles from the border, and this area was once part of Mexico. Perhaps Kate learned some phrases during her time here, or perhaps it's another spirit communicating through your equipment. Marcus led us to room 3327, a luxurious corner room on the third floor of the Victorian building. With high ceilings, large windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and lavish furnishings, it didn't look like a place where a tragedy had occurred. "We've preserved the room in Victorian style," Marcus explained. "Although it has some modern amenities, the bathroom has been renovated, but the bed, dressing table, and many other pieces of furniture are original or restored." "Can we explore other areas of the hotel?" I asked. "I know Kate has also been seen in other places." "Of course," Marcus nodded. "This hallway, the steps leading down to the beach where she was found, and the ballroom. Although we have an event tonight, so you can only go in there after 11 p.m. Marcus pulled out a premium key card. "This is a VIP access card. It will allow you access to most areas, including some service corridors. Just one request: if you encounter other guests, please respect their privacy. Don't film them or disturb them with your equipment." "Of course," I promised. "We're always careful about that." When Marcus left, we began setting up equipment in the room. I placed an infrared camera pointing towards the bed, an audio recorder under the table, and an EMF meter on the dressing table. "Quite impressive," Megan remarked, looking around the luxurious room. "Not like the scary abandoned places we usually go to." "Perhaps that's why Kate stayed," I suggested, half-jokingly. "Who would want to leave a 5-star hotel?" We spent the afternoon exploring the hotel, learning about its rich history. Built in 1888 as a world-class beachfront resort, the Dell has hosted a string of famous figures from U.S. presidents to Hollywood stars. It was also the setting for the classic movie, Some Like It Hot, with Marilyn Monroe. As dusk fell, we went down to the steps where Kate Morgan was found dead. The wooden steps led from the hotel's backyard down to the vast beach where the Pacific waves crashed against the shore. "Exactly here," I said, stopping on a step about 10 feet from the ground. "She was found with a gunshot wound to the head and the gun beside her. But the gun wasn't hers," Megan added, recalling our research. "It was a different caliber than the bullet that killed her." "That's right," I nodded. "That's one of the details that raised doubts about the suicide theory. Some researchers believe she was murdered and the gun was planted to stage the scene." I took out my audio recorder and turned it on. Kate Morgan, we're standing where you were found. We want to know what happened to you. Can you speak to us?" I held out the recorder, listening in silence. Initially, there was only the sound of waves and wind, but after a few minutes, a small, almost inaudible voice spoke through the device. "No few." "That's Spanish," Megan whispered. "Strange, I didn't think Kate was Spanish." "Can you speak English?" I asked. Not my fault." "Not your fault," I repeated. "You didn't commit suicide, did you?" "El doctor promised." "The doctor," Megan said. "Are you talking about a doctor?" Mi bébé, mi bébé." My baby," I translated, looking at Megan in surprise. "She's talking about a child. The abortion theory," Megan whispered. "Perhaps she was pregnant and sought an illegal abortion doctor." "And find the truth." "She wants us to find the truth," I said. "Kate, we'll try. Can you tell us who that doctor was?" "His name in my room." "His name is in your room," Megan gasped. "Perhaps in room 3327 we'll look for it, we'll find it," I promised. "Thank you, Kate." We returned to room 3327 feeling excited and anxious. If Kate Morgan was indeed murdered by an illegal abortion doctor, and if his name was hidden in this room, we could solve a mystery that had existed for over a century. "Where should we look?" Megan wondered, looking around the large room. "The room has been renovated many times since 1892, but Marcus said much of the furniture is original or restored," I pointed out. "Let's start with things that might have been here when Kate was here: the bed, the dressing table, the wardrobe." We began to search carefully, checking every drawer, looking under furniture, and searching for any signs that might be a clue. After half an hour of unsuccessful searching, I began to feel discouraged. "Perhaps it's gone after all these years," I sighed. Suddenly, the EMF meter on the dressing table began to beep rapidly. The reading just shot up from 0.2 mg to 7.8 mg, Megan called. "Are you trying to tell us something?" The lights in the room flickered once, then came back on. I think that's a yes, I said, looking around. She's trying to point something out to us. The EMF meter continued to beep. The reading increased as I moved it towards the dressing table. It's here somewhere, I said, sweeping the device around the antique Victorian dressing table. When I brought it near the large mirror mounted on the table, the reading spiked to 9.6. Mirror, Megan said. Check the mirror. I carefully examined the intricately carved wooden frame surrounding the mirror. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, but as I looked closer, I noticed a small section of the wooden frame that seemed removable. Look, I showed Megan. This part of the frame is different from the rest, as if it's been repaired or replaced. I carefully pressed on that section, and to my surprise, it slid aside, revealing a small compartment inside the wooden frame. I reached in and pulled out a yellowed, folded piece of paper. My God, Megan whispered. What is it? I carefully unfolded the paper. It was a faded, handwritten receipt, but still legible. November 28, 1892, received from KM $50 for medical services, Dr. Montoya. Dr. E. Montoya, I read aloud, and the date is just one day before Kate died. Montoya, a Spanish name, Megan pointed out. That explains why she spoke Spanish. Perhaps the doctor taught her a few phrases, and $50 in 1892 was a huge sum of money, I said, certainly not for a routine checkup. This fits the abortion theory, Megan said. Kate was pregnant, went to Dr. Montoya for an abortion, and the procedure went badly. Perhaps she started bleeding, and he killed her to cover up his mistake. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped significantly, and a faint scent of roses and mint filled the air. Kate is here with us, I whispered. She led us to this evidence. I took out my audio recorder and turned it on. Kate, we found the receipt. What did Dr. Montoya do to you? Did he kill you? After a long pause, a soft whisper sounded. See, promised to help. Killed my baby, killed me. He promised to help you, Megan repeated, her voice choked. But he killed your baby and killed you. Justice, favor. We will bring you justice, Kate, I promised. We will share your true story. We spent the rest of the night searching for information about Dr. Montoya on the internet. It turned out that a Dr. Eduardo Montoya had indeed practiced in San Diego in the 1890s. He was described as a specialist in women's ailments, a euphemism at the time for those who performed illegal abortions. Even more interestingly, we found an old newspaper article from December 1892, just weeks after Kate's death, reporting that a Dr. Montoya had suddenly left San Diego to travel to Mexico and never returned. He fled, Megan said, after killing Kate, and all these years people still thought she committed suicide. I shook my head sadly. She was slandered for a crime she didn't commit. The next morning, we met Marcus and shared our findings, including the receipt. This is incredible, he said. It completely changes the story of Kate Morgan. I'll pass it on to our historians and perhaps the San Diego Historical Museum too. She's been trying to tell everyone the truth for over a century, I said. Now perhaps she can finally be vindicated. Do you think this might help her, move on? Marcus asked, clearly unwilling to say, cross over. I don't know, I answered honestly. But perhaps knowing that people finally know the truth will bring her some peace. As we left the Hotel del Coronado, I couldn't help but look up at the window of room 3327 one last time. In the early morning sunlight, I thought I saw a woman in a black dress, waving goodbye. In our video about the Hotel Coronado, I only mentioned unusual EMP phenomena and strange EVP recordings in Spanish. But the receipt was handed over to the San Diego Historical Museum, where it was being analyzed for authenticity. And a month after our visit, Marcus emailed to announce that a new exhibit about Kate Morgan had opened at the hotel, for the first time presenting her not as a desperate woman who committed suicide, but as the victim of a terrible crime. As we set off for the RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, I wondered how many other souls out there were waiting for their true stories to be told, and if we could be the ones to bring them justice. Part 13. The RMS Queen Mary, one of the greatest ocean liners of the 20th century, now permanently docked in Long Beach, California. I said into the camera, the sea breeze ruffling my hair. Launched in 1936, this ship was once the pride of Britain and a luxurious mode of transport for royalty, celebrities, and the elite. During World War II, it was converted into a troopship, dubbed the Grey Ghost, and transported over 800,000 servicemen. "Cut," Megan yelled, lowering the camera. "Good, Kyle, you're becoming more and more natural in front of the camera." I smiled, looking up at the colossal ship before us. With a length of 1,019 feet and a height of 12 stories, the Queen Mary was an architectural masterpiece, a blend of Art Deco style and the pinnacle of shipbuilding engineering. But it was also known as one of the most haunted places in the world. Did you know there have been at least 9 recorded deaths on board? I asked Megan as we packed up our equipment. And that's just peacetime deaths, not to mention the soldiers who died when it served in the war. Amazingly, the ship is still considered lucky, Megan replied. It never had a major accident. That's right, but that doesn't stop the spirits from lingering, I said. The most famous haunted spots include the boiler room, where a sailor was crushed by a watertight door, the second-class swimming pool, where a little girl drowned, and cabin B340, said to be the most haunted cabin. "And we're staying in cabin B340 tonight," Megan said, half excited, half nervous. "Exactly," I nodded, "where a man was supposedly murdered or committed suicide in the 1960s. We were greeted by Diana, the Queen Mary's Ghost Tour coordinator, a middle-aged woman with short, silver hair and bright eyes. "Phantom Archives," she exclaimed as we introduced ourselves. "I watched your Whaley House video. The incident with James Robinson and the jewelry box was even reported in the local papers." "Thank you," I smiled. "We're thrilled to be here. The Queen Mary is one of the locations we've always wanted to explore." "You won't be disappointed," Diana promised. "We don't have any other overnight guests tonight, so you'll practically have the entire ship to yourselves. Just be careful with a deck. We're doing some repairs, and it's not safe at night." "Can we access the engine room and boiler room areas?" Megan asked. "Yes, but only with a guided tour," Diana replied. "I'll take you down there at 8:00 p.m. After that, you're free to explore the passenger decks and public areas." "And cabin B340, I asked. "It's ready for you," Diana said, handing us an old-fashioned key. "We still keep the original keys for that cabin. Many guests prefer historical authenticity." Diana led us aboard the ship, past the luxurious grand staircase and along long corridors with polished wood paneling. Although converted into a floating hotel and attraction, the Queen Mary still retained the atmosphere of an ocean liner in its heyday, with perfectly restored dining rooms, ballrooms, and lounges. "Most of the paranormal activity happens at night," Diana explained as we walked along B deck. "But even during the day, staff report strange phenomena. Clanging bells from the engine room, children's laughter near the swimming pool, and occasionally, the image of a woman in a white dress on the bow." "I've read about the lady in white," I nodded. "Said to be a first-class passenger who died on board during a pre-war voyage." "Exactly," Diana confirmed. "But our most famous ghostly figure is the man in the overalls in the boiler room area. Many staff and visitors have seen him wandering around the pipes and machinery, wearing a blue uniform from the 1930s. "Do people know who he is?" Megan asked. "John Petter," Diana replied. "An 18-year-old crewman who was crushed by watertight door number 13 in the boiler room in 1966, in a prank that went horribly wrong. He and a friend were playing a game of chicken, trying to pass through the 50-ton watertight door before it closed." "And he didn't make it," I said, feeling a shudder. "That's right," Diana nodded gravely. "He's one of many who died on this ship, from accidents, illness, or sometimes under more mysterious circumstances." We finally reached cabin B340, a large corner room, much larger than typical ship cabins. It had been refurbished with 2 double beds, but retained many original features: wood paneling, porthole windows, and even the original bathtub and sink from the 1930s. "This cabin is actually a combination of 3 separate cabins, B340, B342, and B344, Diana explained. "We've combined them to create a better hotel room experience." "But it's B340 itself, where most of the activity occurs." "I've read about a murder or suicide here," I asked. "It's a complicated story," Diana replied. According to official records, no one died in this cabin. But there are reports from the 1960s of a man who became violent, was forced into his room, and was later found dead with unexplained wounds. The records seem to have been erased or altered. Cover-up, Megan suggested. Possibly, Diana shrugged. The Queen Mary was a national symbol and an important asset in the war effort. A murder or suicide might have been hushed up to protect the ship's reputation. And now that man still haunts this cabin, I said. That's right, Diana nodded. Guests here report lights turning on and off by themselves, blankets being pulled off the bed, and occasionally a dark figure standing by the bed or in the bathroom. Some even say they've been touched or choked in their sleep. Looks like we're in for an interesting night, I smiled, trying to hide my anxiety. I'll let you get settled and set up your equipment, Diana said. See you at 8:00 at the grand staircase for the boiler room tour. As Diana left, we began setting up equipment in the cabin. I placed an infrared camera pointing towards the bed, an audio recorder in the bathroom, and an EMF meter on the table. Megan set up a slow-motion camera to capture any movement in the room. I brought a new compass, I said, taking a small compass from my pocket. I've read that compasses often malfunction on the Queen Mary due to unusual magnetic fields. Could be all the steel in the ship, Megan suggested. Or something else, I said, placing the compass on the table and watching the needle spin wildly and continuously instead of pointing north. That's not a natural phenomenon, Megan admitted, watching the compass spin. Steel would only deflect the compass, not make it spin like this. At 8:00 p.m., we met Diana at the grand staircase for the boiler room tour. She led us deep into the heart of the ship, through narrow staircases and metal corridors, to the engine room and boiler room area. This is the heart of the Queen Mary, Diana explained as we stepped into a vast space filled with pipes, valves, and colossal machinery. 4 Parsons steam turbine engines produced 160,000 horsepower and could propel this 81,000-ton ship at over 30 knots, an incredible feat of engineering. The space was cold and damp, with the clanging of metal and dripping water echoing everywhere. Although the engines had been inactive for decades, there was still a strange sense of life in them, as if they were still waiting to be restarted. And here, Diana said, leading us to a large area with enormous metal doors, is the watertight door section, including where John Petter died. I took out my EMF meter and began to scan around. Immediately, it beeped rapidly, the reading jumping from 0.3 mg to 6.8 mg strong activity, I remarked, moving the device closer to the colossal watertight door marked number 13. As I approached the door, the reading spiked to 9.7 mg. John, Diana called into the space. We have visitors today. They want to talk to you. John Petter, I called, following her lead. We don't mean to disturb. We just want to know what happened to you. Suddenly, a loud noise sounded as if a metal tool had fallen to the floor. We spun around but saw nothing. That happens quite often here, Diana said, clearly not surprised. John seems to like to signal his presence by dropping things or tapping on pipes. I took out my EVP recorder and turned it on. John, we want to hear your story. What happened on that fateful day? We waited in silence, listening for any response through the device. Initially, there was only static, but after a few minutes, a faint voice sounded. Not Sam's fault. Sam, Megan repeated. Who's Sam? John, my friend, not his fault. You're saying Sam is the friend who played the door-running game with you, right? I asked. Yes, he shouldn't be blamed. He was blamed, Diana asked, clearly surprised by this information. I've never heard this in the records. Fired, accused, negligence. Oh, John, Diana whispered. I'm so sorry, we didn't know that. Tell everyone, accident, just an accident. We'll do that, I promised. We'll make it clear that it was just an unfortunate accident and your friend shouldn't be blamed. A cold draft blew past us, and the EMF meter in my hand began to act erratically. The readings fluctuated wildly, then, as suddenly as it began, everything returned to normal. I think he's gone, Diana said. At least for now. We continued the tour, learning more about the ship's rich history and other ghost stories associated with it. Diana told us about Jackie, the little girl who drowned in the second-class swimming pool and is now said to play hide-and-seek with visitors. About the drowned woman, a first-class passenger who committed suicide by jumping from the ship's deck. And about the collision with the HMS Curacoa, a wartime accident when the Queen Mary accidentally cut a smaller escort ship in half, killing 338 people. Some divers report that they can still hear knocking from inside the Curacoa wreck, Diana said, as if the trapped men inside are still trying to escape. When the tour ended, Diana wished us a good night and left, leaving us free to explore the ship. With night having fallen, the Queen Mary took on an entirely different atmosphere. The quiet spaces, empty corridors, and the creaking of the ancient metal hull created a perfect backdrop for supernatural experiences. "We should check the second-class swimming pool," Megan suggested, "where Jackie died." We went to the pool, a large, luxurious space with red and white tiles and decorative columns. Although it had been drained for decades, it still retained the majestic beauty of its golden age. "Jackie," I called softly, "are you here? Can we play with you?" I took a small ball from my pocket and placed it in the center of the empty pool. "If you're here, can you push the ball?" We waited, but the ball remained still. However, the temperature gauge in Megan's hand was recording a distinct cold spot moving around the pool. "Something's moving," she whispered. "Look, the temperature is dropping in a path from one corner to the other." I took out my thermal camera and swept it around the pool. On the screen, I saw something unbelievable. A small, faint bluish glowing figure against the orange-red background of the room. It was the size of a child, about 7-8 years old, and was skipping around the pool. "Jackie," I whispered, "we can see you." The figure stopped as if listening, then slowly it approached the ball. On the thermal camera screen, I saw it bend down as if touching the ball. And to our astonishment, the ball actually rolled a few inches. "My God," Megan whispered. "You did it, Jackie." A small giggle sounded from afar, like a child's laughter. The figure on the thermal camera began to move faster, running around the pool as if playing tag. "Do you want us to play with you?" I asked. The figure stopped again, then seemed to nod. It pointed in one direction, then vanished from the thermal camera's view. "I think she wants us to follow," Megan said. We followed the direction Jackie had pointed, out of the pool area and into a long corridor. The temperature gradually dropped as we walked, as if we were following a cold trail. The corridor led us to a small staircase and up to a deck, the area Diana had warned us to avoid because it was under repair. "We shouldn't be here," Megan whispered. "Diana said it's not safe." "I know," I replied, "but Jackie seems to want to show us something." We carefully proceeded, passing the danger, construction area, do not enter, sign. A deck was the most luxurious area of the ship, with spacious cabins once reserved for the wealthiest passengers. But now it was bare and dusty, with plastic sheeting covering furniture and construction tools scattered everywhere. The cold trail led us to a specific cabin, A456, according to the number on the door. Unlike the other cabins in the hallway, this door was ajar. "Jackie," I called softly, "do you want us to come in here?" No response, but the temperature dropped significantly, and our EMF meter began to beep. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Cabin A456 was much larger than our B340 cabin, with a separate living room, bedroom, and large bathroom. It was undergoing renovation, with paint swatches on the walls and drop cloths covering the floor. "What are you trying to show us, Jackie?" Megan asked. Suddenly, a cold gust of air blew through the room, and one of the drop cloths was pulled aside as if yanked by an invisible hand. Beneath it, a section of the wooden floor had been removed, revealing a gap below. I approached, shining my flashlight into the gap. At first, I saw nothing but dust and cobwebs, but as I looked closer, I saw it. A small metal toy. A rusted old toy car, stuck between the floor joists. "Look," I said to Megan, "an antique toy." I reached into the gap and carefully retrieved the toy car. It was rusty and covered in dust, but it was clearly a toy from the 1930s with a faint Made in England emblem on the bottom. "I think this is Jackie's toy," I said. "Perhaps she dropped it through the floorboards and never found it again, and after all these years, she's still looking for it." A small giggle sounded from the corner of the room, and when we turned, we thought we saw the faint figure of a little girl in an old-fashioned swimsuit, just for a split second before she vanished. I think we should keep it, Megan suggested. Clean it up and place it somewhere on the ship to remember her. Good idea, I nodded, carefully putting the toy car in my pocket. As we returned to cabin B340 to rest for the night, I couldn't help but feel that we had made a connection with Jackie, a child spirit trapped on this ship for nearly a century. But cabin B340 had its own secrets. The moment we stepped in, I felt a difference in the air, heavier, denser, almost oppressive. Do you feel it? I asked Megan. Yes, she nodded, like someone is watching us. We checked the equipment we had set up earlier. The infrared camera was still recording, but the audio recorder in the bathroom had turned off, even though the battery was still full. Strange, I mumbled, turning the device back on. Is anyone here? No clear response, but the compass on the table began to spin faster. It said that a man died in this cabin, I said into the air. We want to know what happened to you. The lights in the room flickered once, then came back on. I'll take that as a yes, Megan said, her voice slightly trembling. I took out my EVP recorder and turned it on. Hello, can you tell us your name? After a long pause, a deep, raspy voice sounded. Walter Parker. Walter Parker, I repeated. What happened to you, Walter? They killed me. Megan and I looked at each other, our eyes wide. Who killed you? Captain didn't want scandal. The captain killed you, I asked, astonished. No, protected. Who did? The captain protected the person who killed you, Megan said, her voice full of horror. Can you tell us what happened? I know, corruption, smuggling, threatened to tell. You discovered a smuggling operation on the ship, I said, trying to understand, and you threatened to expose it. Yes, officer stabbed me, captain covered up, suicide. You were killed by an officer, and the captain covered it up as a suicide, Megan said, her voice full of horror. That's terrible. Justice, need justice. Do you know the name of the officer who killed you? I asked. Jameson, William Jameson, I wrote down the name. We'll find out about him, Walter. We'll try to find the truth. Careful, still watching. He's still watching? Megan asked. No response, but the temperature in the room dropped significantly, and a tense, almost hostile feeling enveloped us. I think we're not alone anymore, I whispered. Just then, a loud noise sounded from the bathroom as if someone had punched the wall. We startled, our hearts pounding. Maybe that's Jameson, Megan said. Perhaps he doesn't want us to know the truth. We're not afraid of you, I said loudly, though it was entirely untrue. Walter Parker deserves justice. A low growl sounded from the bathroom, and the bathroom door slammed shut. From inside, we heard the sound of running water, even though no one had turned on the faucet. What should we do? Megan asked, her voice strained. We'll stay, I decided, but let's keep the lights on, and we'll take turns sleeping. That night, we experienced one of the most terrifying experiences since starting this series. The lights constantly flickered off, even though we turned them back on repeatedly. Heavy footsteps echoed around the cabin, and several times we felt as if someone was sitting on the bed, their weight clearly depressing the mattress. Around 3:00 a.m., when Megan was asleep and I was on watch, I saw a tall, dark shadow standing in the corner of the room. It wasn't the shadow of Walter Parker. It was taller, more solid, wearing what looked like an officer's uniform. Jameson, I whispered. The dark shadow seemed to approach, and I felt a chilling sensation flood my body. I wanted to wake Megan, but I couldn't move. A feeling of paralysis invaded my body. The dark shadow moved close to the bed, and I felt a pressure on my throat, as if an invisible hand was tightening. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. Just as I thought I would pass out, a sudden flash of light appeared from the direction of the bathroom door. In the dim light, I saw the figure of another man, shorter, in old-fashioned civilian clothes. Walter Parker. Jameson's dark shadow turned towards Parker, and the pressure on my throat vanished. The two shadows seemed to confront each other in a silent battle, and then both disappeared, leaving the room in an eerie silence. I trembled, waking Megan, and we decided not to sleep again that night. The next morning, when we met Diana again, we told her about our experiences about Jackie and the toy car, about John Petter and his falsely accused friend, and Walter Parker and the officer named Jameson. These stories are incredible, Diana said, clearly moved, especially about Walter Parker. I'll check our historical records to see if there's any information about an officer named Jameson. We gave her Jackie's toy car, carefully cleaned. Perhaps you could place it somewhere near the pool, I suggested, a place where Jackie can play with it. I know a perfect spot, Diana smiled. A small shelf in the display area near the pool. We'll put a small plaque about Jackie next to it. As we left the Queen Mary, I couldn't help but look back at the colossal ship one last time. For all its beauty and grandeur, it was also the resting place of many souls. Some found peace, some still sought justice, and some, like Jackie, simply wanted to find their long-lost toy. In our video about the Queen Mary, I only mentioned unusual EMP phenomena and strange EVP recordings. But a month after our visit, Diana emailed to inform us that they had found records of an officer, William Jameson, who served on the Queen Mary in the 1960s and was later dismissed for inappropriate conduct, a vague term that could cover many crimes. And as we set off for our final destination, the Riddle House in West Palm Beach, Florida, I couldn't help but wonder what the mysterious characters I had seen in my dreams since the Winchester Mystery House meant, and if we would finally find the answer. Part 14. The Riddle House, located in West Palm Beach, Florida, was built in 1905 and named after its first owner. I said into the camera, the heavy Florida summer air making my shirt stick to my back. But it was its second owner, Dr. Frederick Riddle, a physician with a passion for paranormal research, who turned it into the hotspot for supernatural activity we know today. Cut, Megan yelled, lowering the camera. Great, Kyle, your voice sounds so natural and, wait, are you okay? You look a little green. I nodded, though I felt unwell. The dreams of mysterious characters had become more intense since our visit to the Queen Mary, and I had barely slept during the flight to Florida. The muddy child's handprint from Winchester was still on my wrist, darker than ever. And sometimes I thought I saw it move. I'm fine, I lied. It's just the weather, I'm not used to this humidity. The Riddle House, the two-story Victorian building before us, made me uncomfortable in a different way. Unlike the locations we had explored before, it didn't look scary from the outside. In fact, with its bright yellow paint and spacious, flower-filled porch, it looked quite inviting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with it, as if the cheerful facade was just a mask for something much darker within. Do you know anything about Dr. Riddle? Megan asked, checking our equipment. Not much, I admitted. Most of the information about him is vague. He bought the house in the 1940s and lived here until his death in 1968. He was a trained physician, but gradually became obsessed with researching paranormal phenomena, especially communicating with the dead. And then he started conducting experiments here, Megan said. That's right, I nodded. From what we know, he turned this house into a kind of laboratory where he tried to develop scientific methods to communicate with the other side. We were greeted by Victor, the current caretaker of the Riddle House, a tall, slender man with thick black hair and deep, dark eyes. Something about him made me uneasy. Perhaps it was the way he looked at us, as if evaluating us. Phantom Archives, he nodded as we introduced ourselves. It's time you came here. I've watched all your videos. Quite impressive. Thank you, I replied, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the way he said it's time, as if he had been waiting for us. And thank you for allowing us to film overnight. I think the Riddle House will be a perfect culmination for your journey, Victor said with a strange, small smile. Dr. Riddle would have liked you. Dr. Riddle, Megan hesitated. What do you know about his research? Oh, a great deal, Victor replied, leading us up the porch steps. I've spent years studying his work. In fact, I dare say I'm one of the foremost experts on Dr. Frederick Riddle. What exactly did he do here? I asked as we stepped into the house's grand hall. Victor stopped, looking at us intently. He explored the boundary between worlds, Mr. Porter. He believed that our world and the world of the dead are not entirely separate realities, but different parts of the same spectrum. And what was he trying to do? Megan asked. Open a door between them. Not exactly, Victor shook his head. He believed the door was always open. We just need to learn how to see it, how to read the signs, how to understand the language of the other side. His words sent a shiver down my spine, recalling the mysterious characters in my dreams. The language. Oh yes, Victor smiled. Dr. Riddle developed what he called the language of the dead, a system of symbols he believed could be used to communicate across the boundary. My heart pounded faster. What do these symbols look like? Victor looked at me with a knowing gaze. I think you've seen them already, haven't you, Mr. Porter? In your dreams, ever since Winchester. I froze. I had never mentioned my dreams in any video or even told Megan about them. How do you know about that? As I said, I've studied Dr. Riddle for many years. Victor smiled mysteriously. Let me show you his laboratory. I think you'll find it familiar. Victor led us upstairs to the second floor, then to a large double door at the end of the hallway. He took out a bunch of old keys, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. Inside was a vast room, occupying nearly half of the second floor. It was unlike any laboratory I had ever seen. Instead of scientific equipment, it was filled with strange things. Stone circles carved with peculiar symbols, complex charts hanging on the walls, and a large workbench covered with antique books and papers. But what made me freeze were the characters on the walls. They were identical to the characters in my dreams. Winding lines, spirals, and intricate geometric shapes, unlike any language I had ever seen. My God, I whispered, those are them. You've seen these characters before, Victor said, not as a question but as an affirmation. In my dreams, I nodded, approaching the wall to get a closer look. And at Rolling Hills Asylum and Waverly Hills, what are they? The language of the dead, Victor replied simply. Dr. Riddle spent his life trying to decipher it. He believed it was how spirits communicate when they no longer have a physical voice. But how could I see them in my dreams? I asked. I've never been here before. I had never even heard of Dr. Riddle until we started researching for this series. Victor smiled mysteriously. Perhaps you were chosen, Mr. Porter, like others before you, those who can see through the veil. Others? Megan asked, clearly feeling uneasy. Oh, many have seen these characters throughout the ages, Victor said. Dr. Riddle was not the first, just the first to try and study them scientifically. And did he figure out what they mean? I asked, my eyes still fixed on the characters on the wall. In part, Victor nodded. Enough to understand that they are not just a means of communication, they are a tool, a key. A key to what? I asked, feeling uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. To the veil, Victor replied simply, the boundary between our world and theirs. I looked around the room again, noticing a detail I had overlooked before. In the center of the room was a large circle drawn on the floor, with similar characters carved into the wood. It looked like some kind of complex diagram or chart. What is that? I asked, pointing to the circle. That is Dr. Riddle's greatest work, Victor said. He called it the celestial map, a map not just of space, but of time and dimensions. It marks the places where the veil is thinnest, where our world and theirs almost touch. Like haunted locations, Megan said. Precisely, Victor nodded. Places where spirits can easily cross over. Places where the living can feel the presence of the dead. Places like all the locations we've visited, I said, realizing. LaLaurie Mansion, Eastern State, Stanley Hotel. All of them are on the celestial map, Victor confirmed, and it's no coincidence that you visited them in that order. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Look closely at the celestial map, Mr. Porter, Victor said, pointing to different spots on the circle. LaLaurie here, Myrtle's plantation here, Eastern State, Stanley, Winchester. Every location you visited is marked in the exact order you visited them. That's just a coincidence, Megan said, though her voice lacked conviction. Nothing is a coincidence when it comes to the celestial map, Victor shook his head. You've followed a path laid out long before you began your journey. Every location you've visited, every spirit you've encountered, is part of a larger pattern. Who laid out that path? I asked, feeling confused and slightly afraid. Those who wrote this language, Victor replied, those on the other side of the veil. I looked at Megan, seeing the fear in her eyes mirrored my own. Why? I asked. Why do they want us to follow this path? For the same reason they guided Dr. Riddle, Victor said. They need an interpreter, a medium, a bridge between their world and ours. And that's you, Victor looked directly at me. That's why you can see the characters, why you were led to these places, why the spirits have spoken to you. They have chosen you, Mr. Porter. I looked down at my wrist, where the muddy child's handprint from Winchester was still visible. It started here, I said, at Winchester with Elizabeth. She marked you, Victor nodded. And now you are almost done with your journey. There's just one more step. What step? I asked, not sure I really wanted to know the answer. Victor pointed to the center of the celestial map. Open the door. I took a step back. I don't think I want to do that. It's not a matter of whether you want to or not, Mr. Porter, Victor said. His voice changed, becoming deeper, more authoritative. You've gone too far to stop now. You've seen too much, known too much. They won't let you refuse. Kyle, Megan whispered, grabbing my arm. We should go. Right, I nodded. Both of us started backing towards the door. Victor did nothing to stop us. He just stood there, smiling. You'll be back, he said. You can't escape your destiny. No one can. We quickly exited the laboratory, ran downstairs, and out of the house. Only when we were safely in our rental car did I feel I could breathe normally again. What the hell just happened? Megan asked, her voice trembling. Who was he? I don't think he was Victor, I said. I don't think he was human. He knew about your dreams, Megan said. How could he know that? I don't know, I shook my head. But he was right about one thing. All those locations we visited, they weren't random. I felt like I was being led to them. By whom? Megan asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I think it's time we stopped this series. I think we're going too deep into something we don't understand. Megan nodded, clearly relieved. Agreed. Let's go back to the hotel, pack our bags, and catch the earliest flight back to Los Angeles. We drove back to the hotel in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. But when we entered our hotel room, I knew immediately that something was wrong. On the wall, written in what looked like dried mud, were the characters. The same characters I had seen in my dreams on the walls of the Riddle House. How could they be here? Megan whispered, staring at the characters. We just checked into this room this morning. No one knows where we are. I approached the wall, looking closely at the characters. They looked familiar. But in a different way, not because I had seen them in my dreams, but because I had seen them elsewhere. I can read them, I exclaimed in surprise. What? Megan asked. How can that be? I don't know, I shook my head, but I understand what they mean. They say, return, complete the circle. Kyle, you're scaring me, Megan said, her voice strained. I'm scaring myself, I admitted. But Megan, if everything Victor said is true, if I've been chosen for some reason, I can't just run away. I need to know why. You're not actually considering going back there, are you? Megan asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. I think I have to, I said, but you don't have to go. In fact, I want you to stay here. No way, Megan shook her head fiercely. If you go back, I'm coming with you. We're a team, remember? I looked at Megan, feeling a wave of gratitude. Thank you, I said simply. We returned to the Riddle House as the sun was setting. The Florida sky shifted from blue to pink, then purple. The house looked different in the twilight, less inviting, more menacing, as if its true nature was emerging. Victor was waiting for us on the porch, as if he knew we would return. I told you, he said as we approached. You left a message in our hotel room, I said. How did you know where we were? I didn't leave any message, Victor shook his head. Not me. Then who? Megan asked. Those who called you here, Victor replied. Those who guided you through all those locations, those who chose you. Why? I asked. Why me? Because you can see, Victor said simply. Because you can hear, because you can feel. You've always been a sensitive person, haven't you, Mr. Porter, even as a child? I nodded, vaguely recalling strange childhood experiences I had tried to forget. Whispers in the dark, figures in the corner of my eye, the feeling of always being watched. That's why you started your YouTube channel, wasn't it? Victor continued. Not because you wanted to prove that ghosts are real, but because you already knew they were real and you wanted to understand them. All right, I admitted. I could always sense something, but that doesn't explain the characters or how I was led to those locations. No, Victor agreed. That's a grander plan, a plan that has been unfolding for decades, if not centuries. Dr. Riddle was just a part of it, and now so are you. What plan? I asked. To open the door, Victor replied. To thin the veil, to allow a greater connection between our world and theirs. Why do they want that? Megan asked. Because they are lonely, Victor said, his voice suddenly filled with emotion. Because they are trapped. Because they want to be heard, to be seen, to be remembered. I thought of all the souls we had met on our journey: James Robinson, Samantha Wells, Kate Morgan, Walter Parker. All of them wanted justice, wanted their truth to be told. This isn't about an invasion from the other side, Victor continued. It's not about spirits possessing the living. This is about creating a bridge, an understanding, a way for two worlds to coexist peacefully. And what do I have to do? I asked. Complete the circle, Victor replied. Follow the celestial map to its final point. Open the door. I looked at Megan, seeing the anxiety in her eyes but also curiosity. We had gone too far to stop now. All right, I decided, just show me how. Victor led us back to the laboratory, where the celestial map drawn on the floor was still waiting. He showed me a spot in the center of the circle. Stand here, he instructed, and think about all the locations you've visited, all the spirits you've met, all the stories you've heard. I did as he instructed, stepping into the center of the celestial map. Immediately, I felt a change in the air, as if it was becoming thick, heavy with an electric charge. Remember, Porter, Victor said. His voice seemed to come from a distance. LaLaurie Mansion and the wet fingerprint, Myrtle's plantation and the children's footsteps. Eastern State, Block D Stanley Hotel and the man. Winchester Mystery House, Elizabeth. Rolling Hills, Emma. Waverly Hills, Mary. Crescent Hotel and Samantha. Whaley House and James Robinson. Hotel del Coronado and Kate Morgan. Queen Mary and Jackie. As he listed each location, each spirit, I could see them in my mind's eye, vivid images of each place, each face. And as I did, the characters on the celestial map began to glow with a faint, soft blue light. Now think about the Riddle House, Porter, Victor commanded. About Dr. Frederick Riddle and his research, about the language of the dead. I did so, and the light from the characters grew stronger, brighter, until the entire room was illuminated by an eerie blue glow. Now, Porter, Victor said, his voice seeming to blend with dozens of other voices. Read the characters, open the door. And I could read them. I don't know how, but I understood the meaning of each character, each winding line and sharp angle. I began to speak, my voice no longer my own. Anamnesis, metanoia, catharsis, apotheosis. As the last word left my lips, the light from the characters erupted into a blinding column of light, shooting straight up to the ceiling and threw it into the night sky above. And then I saw it an opening in the air, like a curtain being pulled aside. And beyond that opening was not darkness or void, but another version of the room we were standing in, like looking through a mirror, except the reflection wasn't quite accurate. And in that version of the room were people, not faint figures or specters, but real people, as clear and solid as Megan and I, dozens of people, hundreds of people, standing in silence, looking through the opening. I recognized some faces. A woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, whom I knew was Samantha Wells. A young woman in a black dress, who must be Kate Morgan. A little girl in an old-fashioned swimsuit, Jackie from the Queen Mary. My God, Megan whispered beside me, they're all there. Not just the ones we met, I said, looking at the crowd of faces, all of them, all the dead. Not all, Victor said, and as I looked at him, I realized that he too was glowing with the same eerie blue light as the characters. Only those who chose to stay, those with unfinished business, those who needed to be seen, to be heard, to be remembered. You are him, I exclaimed, finally understanding. You are Dr. Riddle. Victor, or Dr. Riddle, smiled. I tried to complete my work in life, but I failed. I was not strong enough, not sensitive enough, not like you. So what is all this? I asked, pointing to the opening where faces were still looking at us. Is this the afterlife, heaven, hell? Neither, Riddle shook his head. This is just another version of reality, a place that exists parallel to your world, a place where those who have died but cannot move on remain, a waiting place. You could say that, he replied. Waiting for what? Megan asked. Closure, Riddle replied. Completion. Answers. Every soul here has an unanswered question, an unfulfilled task. Only when they find their answers can they continue their journey. And that's why they chose me, I said, beginning to understand. They need someone on the other side who can help them. Precisely, Riddle nodded. You are not just a medium, Mr. Porter. You are a savior, one who can help lost souls find their way. How, I asked, how can I help all these people? By doing what you have done, Riddle smiled. Listen to them, tell their stories, find the truth, bring justice. I looked back through the opening where the faces still watched with hope and expectation. There are too many, I said. I can't help all of them. It will take a lifetime. Yes, it will take a lifetime, Riddle agreed. But not just yours alone. There are others like you, Mr. Porter, other sensitives, those who can see, who can hear. You can find them, teach them, guide them. Like a school, Megan suggested. A guild, Riddle corrected. A group of enlightened ones who dedicate their lives to helping those on the other side of the veil, those like I once was, those like you can become. I looked back at the waiting faces once more. I thought of all the souls we had helped on our journey, James Robinson, Samantha Wells, Kate Morgan. How much peace I had brought them just by telling their stories, by finding the truth. All right, I decided. I'll do it, I'll help them. Riddle smiled, a genuine smile of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Porter, thank you from all of us. The opening began to close, the faces slowly fading. But before it closed completely, Riddle added one more thing. Remember, you are never alone, Mr. Porter. We are always with you, always watching, always guiding. And then the opening closed, the blue light faded, and Riddle, or Victor, vanished with it, leaving Megan and me standing alone in the now dark laboratory. We stood in silence for a moment, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Finally, Megan spoke. So, what just happened? I think, I said slowly, we just started a new job. I'm sitting in my new office in Los Angeles, looking out over the city below. It's been a year since our experience at the Riddle House, and everything has changed. The Phantom Archives YouTube channel now has over 50 million subscribers, and we've expanded into a network of paranormal investigators across the country. But our true work, our real mission, remains a secret. Megan has become my full partner, both in our public and secret work. And we've found others like us. Sensitives, those who can see, who can hear, who can help. I look down at my wrist, where the muddy child's handprint from the Winchester Mystery House has transformed into a real tattoo. Our mark of recognition, the symbol of our mission. On the desk before me is a large map of the United States, with red dots marking locations not just the places we've visited, but many others. Places where the veil is thinnest, places where lost souls are waiting to be helped. And beside the map is a ledger, its first page covered with the strange characters, the language of the dead. The language I can now read fluently. My phone rings, it's Megan. Did you see the news? She asked when I answered. About the house in Boston. Yes, I replied. It's time for our next trip. I looked out the window again, but this time I didn't just see the city. I saw them faint shadows, pale faces, souls still seeking answers. And I know that as long as they seek, I will listen. As long as they speak, I will tell their stories, because that's why I was chosen.